Shall we make a slightly delayed departure?
That clock's actually wrong. My phone says 5:31. We're right on.
Oh, perfect. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to start with the results of our closed session.
Yes, I asked you to take action on the public employee discipline. Jane did make the motion with a second by Shelley, and the board voted 5-0 unanimously supporting the 3-day suspension for the employee.
And with that, do we have any changes in our agenda?
We have none?
And so to the approval of the agenda,
I'll move to approve.
Second. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to award the seconding to Shelley.
I think she beat me by just a little bit.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the minutes of the former meeting.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
And now we move to 7.1.1 variable term waiver for employment of speech language pathology services credential, action item.
I'll move to approve, or do we have to talk about it?
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
And now 7.3.1 resolution 18-1902 in recognition of September 17th as Constitution Day and Citizenship Day. This is an action item. We're going to approve a resolution, and as a school board, we've decided that when we have these resolutions, we're going to discuss them at least a little bit instead of just saying yes, we approve it. And so each of us is taking one, and or at least three of us are, and I've got this constitutional subject. And the thing about it is that September 17th was the day they actually signed the Declaration. I didn't know that. And I guess it wasn't...
The Constitution, the Declaration.
I'm sorry, the Constitution. I would have gotten a B. Close enough, Mr. Ruff. You understood it had something to do with all that stuff.
All those old guys in wigs and tights.
Yes. So September, so I guess it wasn't really it wasn't like many things, they're not effective until it's signed. So I just never thought of September 17th as being a significant date. So that's my little blurb. And now we move forward to the next one.
Well, are we approving each
Oh,
one?
yes, let's approve that.
I'll move to approve. Constitution Day is September 17th.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And now we move to, I believe, the PTA?
Resolution,
No,
Hispanic
yes, 7.3.2, Resolution 18-1903, in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month.
And I have changed our resolution slightly, so I'm going to read the entire resolution. I've omitted the third clause, and I've added a couple.
Kathy, are these the copies here? Or did we have them in the
There's some
back?
in the back
new one?
also.
Okay.
There's some in the back, and these are for Andy and Cheryl. Whereas Ojai Unified is home to about 890 kindergarten through grade 12 students of Hispanic descent, and whereas Ojai students reflect the great diversity of culture and heritage of the many countries of the Iberian Peninsula, the continents of North and South America, and the Caribbean islands, and whereas the Ojai Unified School District has established that each and every student is to be celebrated and appreciated for the distinct and vibrant contributions made by sharing cultures, language, ideas, beliefs, and values within a school community. Whereas the contributions of our Latino and Hispanic students and families are a vibrant and vital part of our public school system. Whereas Hispanic culture and traditions are inextricably interwoven into California's social and economic fabric, and Hispanic Americans have made and continue to make important contributions in all facets of California life: government, business and industry, agriculture, trade and commerce, education, visual and performing arts, science and sports. And whereas all students need an opportunity to understand the common humanity underlying all people, to develop pride in their own identity and heritage, and to respect and accept the identity and heritage of others. And now there it be resolved that the Ojai Unified School District recognizes September 15th through October 15th, 2018 as Hispanic Heritage Month and encourages all local public schools to support this occasion by participating in appropriate instructional activities.
Would anyone like to move to adopt?
I would just like to add something
Thank
for
you.
those who speak Spanish in our audience, that este mes de septiembre rendimos honor a la herencia hispana del Valle de Ojai y a las familias hispanas que contribuyen tanto a nuestra comunidad y a nuestras escuelas. Y le agradecemos por sus contribuciones y apreciamos todo lo que agrega a nuestra familia de la escuela. Gracias a ustedes. And I just wanted to add that it really struck me the other day, and it had nothing to do with this, but I was just sitting and thinking that in the history, it wasn't that long ago that right where we sit was Mexico. And before that, right where we sit was Spain. And I think it's interesting and important to remember the history and where we came from and how all the pieces fit together.
Thank you, Thane. And would anyone like to move to approve the resolution?
I will move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then moving to 7.3.3, resolution in recognition of Parent-Teacher Organizations Membership Month. Jane.
So I'm going to consolidate a little bit for time. Whereas parent-teacher organizations in the Ojai Unified School District currently have rosters of parents, teachers, and community members who act as a valuable resource for starting and maintaining programs and projects to benefit all children, youth, and the community. Whereas research provides substantial evidence that children whose families provide a caring and supportive environment and are actively involved in their schools have a higher probability of personal and academic success. Whereas statistics also show that highly successful schools have active parent and community involvement. Therefore, be it resolved, the Ojai Unified School District Board of Education hereby proclaims September 2018 as Parent-Teacher Organization Membership Month. Go get those members. And I'll move to approve the resolution.
And I'll just add, I'm as you know, a huge fan of our PTAs, especially in this district. They do so much, and they have to. And increasingly, I feel like the way forward for any school, ideally actually, but also as a matter of need, is really close relationship between families and the schools and the community. And the PTA is a great way to help accomplish that. Anyone like to move to
So I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I believe we go down to the GAN limit.
That's right. So we have our fourth resolution of the night, and whereas each of the previous ones I think were meaningful, and I appreciate the commentary that were added, this one is not so meaningful. This one, there are many silly things that the state requires of us, perhaps none more so than the GAN limit calculations each year. To my knowledge, even though in our commentary here it says that we had to start doing this calculation in 1979, what it's doing is it pulls out certain funding sources and wants to make sure that we are spending a certain amount of funds in the classroom. What we say here is that at this time, most California school districts are exactly at their allowable GAN limit. I am not familiar with any district over the past 40 years who has ever not met this criteria. Because it's so weird, actually, if you don't meet the local criteria, then you actually have a state calculation that you're able to kind of piggyback on and say, well, we don't do it here, but overall the state is spending enough, and so we're able to get there. So this truly is a pro forma resolution, although I am happy to report that once again, we have in fact met our sufficient spending for the GAN limit.
Wow, that's your integrity. That's seriously Andy's integrity, because he easily could have gone, this is so hard, you guys. And I don't know how we did it, but.
Passed every year.
Sorry, you moved?
Yes.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
One thing I did want to ask, I forgot to ask you. It almost looks like I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking at, but looks like the tax revenues, the total proceeds of taxes, it's a lower number for 18-19 than for 17-18. I thought that was interesting.
So again, this is a calculation that ends up pulling out a lot of our actual revenue. Remember, our budget is actually about 26 million.
Right.
So it is, less than that, but it's, I believe, accounting for the lower enrollment.
Got it.
I'm ready.
It's always best to ask questions after you voted.
I was making some.
Well, for the heavy lifting now, actually, I am going to be handing it over to Patty for our review of the unaudited actuals. So she has a brief PowerPoint and is available for questions.
And we're at
It's free.
7.4.2.
Yes. So, I'm gonna start off by just giving a review of how did we do this last fiscal year. Last time that we met, I presented the second interim, and at that time, we were projecting to end the fiscal year with 693,000 of undesignated unappropriate balance. And if you remember, that's the balance that the district can spend after we had set aside our restricted accounts, our committed, our assignments. So at unaudited actuals, we actually ended the year with $873,260. So that, to me, met our expectations. We're better off $180,258 than what we were at second interim. So that's like in a big shell what unaudited actuals are.
Better that way than the other way, right?
Right. So just a brief overview of what the unaudited actuals are. There are actual expenditures and revenues as of June 30th. The audit team, when they come and audit our financials, they will use this as a guideline for any of the audit that they will do, and we're having them come in November to do our audit for the district. All our accounts, all our books are closed during the months of July and August, and again, it reflects what was spent and what received as of June 30th. And we do have to remember, it is a snapshot in time. Had we closed the books maybe 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks later, our numbers would have been completely different. So it's just we're taking a picture of that date and reporting on it. Now, this is our fund balance. Now, is there any questions, or am I going a little too fast? No? Okay. Our fund balance of what I reported at second interim and what I'm reporting today, our revenues were a little higher, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Our expenditures were higher. I want to show you the very bottom of our unadjusted ending fund balance because, again, when I said earlier that timing is everything, at the bottom we did designate some monies in the 18-19 school year for the purchase of 2 buses. We had budgeted for them in the 17-18 school year, but we didn't receive them till like the 3rd or the 4th or whatever
We
day.
received one
Yeah.
in June. The other 2 didn't come until July.
So we have to set that money aside in the 18-19 school year because we had already budgeted for it in 17-18, but it was just a timing issue. And so this expense is going to show up in our books for next year. So we set that money aside already from our undesignated unappropriated balance, of our ending fund balance to give us a true undesignated unappropriated balance. I'm going to go to the revenue side to show what the differences were from second
And so,
interim.
just to be sure everyone does see, because the PowerPoint's a little hard to see
small.
that many numbers, but the chart that she was showing there is a chart that's on page 3 of 9 of your materials, and then the next slide she's about to go to is page 4 of 9. You're doing great.
Okay. So our changes in revenues, LCFF revenue sources, we were pretty close to it, so it was only a difference about $5,800. Federal revenues, if you remember, these are like Title I, Title II monies that when we expense the money is when we're actually able to book the revenue as well. So this is unspent allocations that we didn't spend all in the 17-18 school year. The state revenues is where you see a
Real
big
quick, Patty,
jump.
just to
Yes.
hit on that, so the federal revenues, again, we're not actually looking at we lost revenue or it was a lose it or use it or lose it sort of scenario. What
Right.
it is we didn't, to be able to actually realize the revenue, we have to have offsetting expenditures. We didn't have that in this year, and so we have to reduce our revenue for this
For
year.
this year.
But it's going to end up being rolled over into revenue for
Right.
18-19. So that will be one of the reasons why at first interim we'll see an increase
Right.
in our federal revenues.
Right, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that you will see all these federal revenues, again, as an increase in revenue from adopted budget, just because that's when I'll report these unspent funds. The state revenues is the one where it was a really high jump, and that's because the state has given us new, if I remember what it is, it's the STIRS on behalf, and basically what it is, we have to do a phantom entry. We have to book a revenue and we have to book an expense, so that the LEA or OHI books the proportionate share of the total retirement system's liability. So it's our share of what the total pension liability is at the state level. And so this is why you see a huge increase in state revenues, and when I go over to the expenditure side, you'll see a huge increase in the employee benefits, which is the CalSTRS. It's just a phantom entry. It nets out to zero, but it is something that we do have to book.
So will it actually, so if I take this 1,078,000, if I take away the 855 that you
Right.
mentioned as the CalSTRS, and I'm also taking away 468, 164? Is that a phantom thing too, or that's an actual increase?
There was an actual other increase under state revenue, which was a Proposition 39 revenues. We weren't aware that we were gonna get these revenues right before June 30th, and that's because it was another timing thing. We were able to submit all our paperwork to the state to have our defined plan, and so we did get, was it 468,164 in additional revenue, that Prop 39 money, which is that one energy efficiency program that we're doing district-wide. And so we were able to get that money in 17-18 and spend it, and we weren't aware we were gonna get it. It was just a timing issue of, could have been in June, it could have been in September. They didn't give me a really good date as when they were gonna disperse the funds. So the 855,000 and the 468, 164 together is roughly, with a couple of other offsetting revenues, will equal to that 1.78 million, 1.078 million.
It's not, but that's what I was wondering, because it only is 223. Sorry. If I take 1,078,000, I take away 855, and I take away, or
460,
then after I take away 855, I'm only left with 223.
and then 468,000.
So we've lost other
Let's see.
revenue, other state revenue.
It's it's the CCPT grants, the pathways. I'm looking at the actual profit and loss revenue, this one right here. And it gives more detail of all the state revenues.
Okay.
And that one is the CTI incentive grant, which is another grant that we recognize revenue as we're expending it. Doesn't mean that we're losing the allocation, it just means we weren't able to spend it in 17-18, so we have to reduce the revenue.
These
And
are
then-
as
Yep.
page 7 and
Yeah,
9
right.
within.
In the middle, right in
Yep.
the middle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So again, just to emphasize, because I like to draw attention to the funny things the state has us do, this phantom entry, and for the union's sakes also, if you're not familiar, if you don't remember it from last year, I think last year was the first year that was actually a legal requirement we do. The year before it was guidance. I don't know that we did it the year before.
The auditors did an audit adjustment, and
Okay.
so
So this is going to be something that we'll be seeing each year, and what the state really is doing is they're trying to make more visible the unfunded liability with our pension system. And so what this is saying it's kind of a pay-as-you-go formula. If we were to try to fully fund the gap between where the current, it's 70% funded, the current 70% amount that's funded, to get it to full funding. So what they're trying to show here is, again, that deficit, and we all are speculating about whether or not at some point in the future this is going to be more than just a phantom entry, but actually something they begin asking the districts to begin paying a portion of, or how they're going to be trying to solve this pension gap, funding gap. But
Besides the percentage increase, that's not doing it?
correct. Right, so the percentage
It's
increase is
helping, or
it's
that's
certainly
just-
helping,
Okay.
certainly helping, but it's still
Not
a challenge. Yeah.
So I just want to point out that I do summarize the big contributors of the increase or the difference in whatever, either way. But I'm more than happy to put more detail on the reports. Oh, okay. So the next area, the local revenues, we do see an increase of about $75,000, and that's mostly it was E-rate money, and what did we get? Oh, and we got a slightly higher special education apportionment, and that's under local revenues because it comes through the SELPA. So it is a local revenue. So that's it in the revenues. Do you have any questions? Okay, so go over to the expenditures. From second interim to unaudited actuals, our certificated salaries were lower by $37,000, and then our classified salaries were higher by $65,000.
Can we have a little conversation about that?
Yes. So, under the certificated salaries, so this is another one where we have budgeted throughout the year that we're anticipating to plan to spend money on the CCPT grants, the CT incentive grants. And so at the end of the year, we end up not spending that money, and so this is a decrease in that. Now, for the classified salaries, they were not properly budgeted, and that was something that I was doing where we get money from the donations, and sometimes they tell me it's classified, sometimes they tell me it's certificated, and a lot of times I'll put it in the certificated because that's usually what we use more. And this was the end result at the end of the year. We get a lot of money in donations, and sometimes we don't know where they're spending it at until we're getting closer to closing the books. Now, under employee benefits, this is a huge increase where I was talking about the $855,000 that we had to do that phantom entry. And of course, it's a little lower, and that's due to the lower in the certificated salaries and classified salaries as well. Sometimes we budget for them to have benefits, but in reality, at the end of the year, we have employees that were hired that didn't have benefits. Services, books and supplies and services and other, if you can see, that's a huge drop from what we were anticipating in spending, and that again is those categorical programs, those on both the federal level and the state level that we did not spend. But again, this is going to be carry forward money that's going to be budgeted in first interim, so you'll see this increase from adopted because now we know carry forward amounts.
Okay, and can you explain to me what categorical program means?
Sure, it's those federal Title I monies where they basically have strings attached. So in order to recognize the revenue, you have to recognize the expense. And at the end of the year, when we're closing the books, we can't recognize the revenue, and we have to reduce the expenditures because we didn't spend it. But it doesn't mean, like Andy said, we did not lose that money. It just means we get to carry it forward for the next year.
So can I ask a question about that? I mean, if it's Title I funds, don't we feel like, well, then what kind of services can we add so that we're using those funds to support the kids who are?
Right.
Absolutely. So that's been, I know Cheryl has been very involved in that this year with Patty as
Yeah.
well as Marilyn, but looking at a increased emphasis and focus on how we really allocate those dollars across the district. Do you want to share any as far as
Nothing
the-
to say except that Patty and Marilyn and I have met, and then I've met with the principals to really look at making sure that we're allocating it out well. I mean, we come close to spending all of it. We do definitely try to spend all of it. One of the difficulties, though, is that you tend to plan in the spring for the next year, or at least to kind of get things, mapped out for your programs. And then we don't always know our carryover from the year before, so then you come in and then it's not till maybe October that you know that you have more money for that year, and then you're kind of scrambling to figure out what other programs you're gonna add. But yes, we would wanna use the money, and yes, we try to use the money.
But these are like, just to be clear, they're like rollover minutes, so to speak, right? I mean, you don't lose them ever.
Right.
So if you haven't spent them, you just try to spend them in the future, and if you
Absolutely.
fail in the future, you still have them to spend yet again in the future.
Yes.
But I'm
But
saying-
you really want them for those kids, for that
Yeah, I get it. I just wanted to,
Okay.
the worst case scenario would be somehow our failure to spend it would have given rise to losing it altogether. But yeah, I get it. I get it's been allocated in real time and expected to be used on the kids that are, to whom it was allocated.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and also to have us, I mean, Kevin and I sent him something, we were talking about our Hispanic communities and ways to reach out to them and to get them more involved. And I came across a district that actually has parents come during the day and learn, so there's like a language program for parents, to come and learn with their kids. So I don't know if that's legal to do with Title I funds, but it'd be interesting to think about, how can we better, because obviously obviously we can improve. So it'd be interesting to figure out how we can do that.
Those are conversations that happen in the school site council every single year. That is exactly what that body is supposed to be discussing. So, yes, we can look into those things.
And it could be another timing issue too, that I know that at the end of the year, some of the principals know what they want to do in the next fiscal year, and they look at how much money they have left over and they order stuff and it doesn't get received by June 30th. So therefore we can't book it in this school year. But yes, we do have carryover that
The other
we have
big
been,
piece that was hard to spend is that we had to set aside 10% for professional development only, not to be used on programs directly benefiting students. And so that was set aside, and then throughout the year, we're trying to spend it, but in some cases, we didn't get to spending all the professional development funds.
So some of this may be professional development funds.
Had to be spent on professional development. But they've loosened that now, so we don't have to set aside 10% anymore, which will be good. So we can make sure it all goes to,
right.
we'll definitely use some of it for professional development, but we don't have to let it not be spent. I mean, we can use it toward programs if that's where we see it better being used.
And just going back, Jane, to your question about categorical, so our old funding system, remember, was called revenue limit. We had it for about 40 years. And what ended up happening was, all these, I feel like my theme tonight is about the silly things they do in Sacramento. But they, legislator would want to have their particular pet project. They want to make sure that $25,000 went to every school district to serve kids with red hair or some other, perhaps better.
Of course, you choose red hair.
They have all sorts of different categories of, and so what ended up happening was the state, even though they were giving us perhaps $7,000 per student, they were tying our hands so greatly as to how we could actually use those funds that you only had maybe $500 that were discretionary because everything else had to fit into these certain categories of programming. LCFF, the whole idea was to do away with those 50 plus categoricals and have a single big lump sum that came to us. Then we used through the LCAP process the ability to really locally decide how we're going to spend the money. If you go back to page 7 of 9 of your packet, what you'll see is everything in the second and third sections of money, federal sources and other state sources, those are all categoricals. So LCFF was successful at the state level at least. It was never successful, of course, at the federal because they're doing their own thing. But at the state level, it was successful for maybe 6 months on eliminating categoricals, and then all of a sudden they start coming back that someone wants to give us some money to bring the energy efficiencies, and that was the Climate Tech program that we were able to fund by that Prop $39, or they're paying for CTE programs or other things. All of a sudden start creeping back. So that's what, when we talk about categoricals, it's funding that we receive that has to be for a very specific purpose, and so we can't necessarily use that money for, an extra teacher in, elementary school or overall staff compensation increases, that sort of thing.
And it is interesting that they said that they got rid of all the categories, but they're growing. We get more, money and allocated monies to the district, but they come with strings attached.
Right.
So.
I have one other question on the capital outlay.
Mm-hmm.
So the $592,000 for Climate Tech, I thought that was going to be capital funds in Measure J.
It is a combination of capital fund, it's a combination of this Prop 39 money because this money needed to be spent on an energy efficiency program.
Okay.
So we spent this money first, then we had 500,000 from the Fund
Developer
250, which is the capital, I can't remember that fund name, and the rest was Measure J. So it's three funding sources, but this funding source was first expense, and so we did have some money that we had received in prior years. Combined with the new monies that we received, we expensed it all in the 17-18 school year.
And that brings in that 468,000.
Right. And then Miners Oaks did receive playground equipment of $37,400, which is part of that capital outlay, because we did have a huge increase from second interim to unaudited actuals.
Miramonte, right?
Miramonte, sorry. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, Miramonte. Barbie and HR was able to purchase a lift for our maintenance department that was purchased with safety credit monies. Let's see, no. And I do speak about the 244,000 decrease in the buses that weren't received before June 30th. We will see them this year sometime. Actually, they're already been paid. You will see them as expenditures in the 18-19 school year, so that is already there. What else did we have in the capital outlay? Those are the big increases. We did have, I think I actually did report about this. We had that huge project in the welding area over at Nordhoff. So part of this $900,000 was that, but this is just the difference from what I reported in second interim and now. The last category, other outgo, it increased by $105,000. Again, those excess costs, and again, those are the kiddos that are serviced by the County Office of Education for special education needs. So we did increase by $105,000 this last year. And the transfer to cafeteria. Now, this last year, or 17-18, was the first year where we had a full year of the cafeteria staff that had the increase in their salaries. If we recall, last school year, we only had half a year. This 17-18, all the cafeteria staff had gotten a huge pay raise because of the minimum wage law. And so we had budgeted $60,000 to transfer the cafeteria, but we had to adjust that to $75,000 to be able to cover the increase in the salaries and the increase in the CalPERS and all the other benefits that are costing the cafeteria fund. So, what's next? I am going to be sending this over to the county, and they will be reviewing our financials, and they will put their stamp of approval. And the auditors are coming into the office in November, and they will be looking at all our expenditures for the 17-18-19 school year. They prepare their audit report. That needs to be submitted to the state by the 15th, and then it gets presented to the board. I think last year it was presented in January, and we were talking about whether it's going to be January or December that the report will come over to the board. Is there any questions?
Just a question on that.
Sure.
The auditors, that's the third party, the outside auditors
Right.
that we've retained the last couple of years.
Right.
We made the switch a few years ago.
We did.
In some ways, it seems not that long ago. In some ways,
Yeah.
it seems like a long time ago.
It'll be the third time.
Yeah, that's right. This is their third year.
I don't think I worked with the previous auditor, so I
Yeah.
want to say 3 years, because I started in 15 here, so it's been 3 years. And yes, they are outside independent auditors. And Kelly's the lady that presents the report, I don't remember. Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
I'll move to approve the unaudited actuals.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on. Where are we?
4.3.
7.4.3.
7.4.3 Capital Facilities Fund Annual Financial Report.
This is just an information item. We're required to report out this separately each year. This is that fund that Patty was just talking about, our capital facilities fund, from which we receive developer fee dollars. You'll see that we brought in about $250,000 in revenue this year. We actually are beginning to spend down the balance. We started the year at $1 million. With revenue, we went up to 1.26, and we spent down to 850 or so. So the biggest piece of that, of course, is the Climate Tech project, and there will be, again, 367 was booked in 17-18. The remainder of the amount that Patty mentioned will be booked in this 18-19 year.
So that's an information item. Does anyone have any questions? Moving on to 7.4.4, active transportation program and the proposed resolution.
Did you do that, Andy?
I did.
It's great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I really was looking through it and realizing how it really would help our, getting to school, riding bikes.
Especially if it was 8:35.
Yeah.
I had Jane, I had the exact same comment. I thought it was really well done, and what I particularly like about the resolution, and maybe, why not, it's somewhat significant, so I'm gonna read it, if you don't mind. But what I like also is I think to the extent that anyone would have concerns about the school board, overstepping into an area that's, obviously before the city council, I think it's very well written in that it describes our interest, and as I said to Andy, I kind of think we stay in our lane very well with this resolution. Whereas the city of Ojai was awarded a $2.8 million active transportation program grant for pedestrian and bike improvement on Maricopa Highway and Ojai Avenue. Whereas Ojai Public Works Director Greg Grant presented the concept and received constructive feedback from board members at the August 14th, 2018 regular meeting of the Ojai Unified School District Board of Trustees. Whereas the Ojai Unified School District operates 3 schools located adjacent to the roads subject to improvements: Nordup High School, Matilaha Junior High, soon to be middle school, and Chaparral High School. Whereas this active transportation program initiative will provide a much needed safety improvement in the area and will provide a safer transportation experience for students, walkers, and bike riders, as well as students with disabilities and the general population of pedestrians and bicyclists in Ojai. And whereas it is our belief that the proposed activities are consistent with the goals of the Safe Routes to School program and the policies of the Ojai Unified School District, and that completing this project would provide a significant opportunity, I guess I would have said improvement, sorry.
That's okay. You can make
Opportunity for the city of Ojai to improve student safety in the Ojai Valley. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Ojai Unified School District as follows. The Ojai Unified School District formally supports the city of Ojai's active transportation program efforts and will collaborate to support the goals of the project, namely to improve safety, encourage walking and biking to school, and to improve the walking and biking environment for students of the district and other users of the routes. And then he signs it, Year of Our Lord. That's weird.
I'll move to approve unless there's questions.
I just want to make a comment because I think I'm going to abstain on this, just because I like the concept, I like the idea. I'm really concerned about the details. And without trying some of this stuff out, I'm really concerned about how it's going to happen. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not for it.
Anyone else? I would only say in response to that, I take Greg's word that experts are looking and have looked at these issues, experts with respect to traffic movement and that this would be indeed an improvement. That's what they believe, and I'm willing to support experts who've done the work.
I've seen experts do crazy things. There's a hole in a Soyuz capsule.
Anyone
Who
else?
moves to approve?
Go
Yeah.
forward. We're ready to vote. So all those in favor? Aye.
Did we have a
And-
second?
Sorry, do we have a second?
Michael
Michael second,
seconded.
yeah. And with the abstention of Mr. Whipple. Moving forward, 7.4.5, the Measure J update. Mr. Greg Grant.
Greg, do we have a PowerPoint for this, or are we just doing it off the paper presentation? Okay. And do we have copies in the back for our audience? Do you guys have the presentation? Or you guys received the packet as well on Fridays, but. So this is just a presentation, an update on our summer projects that have been completed or are near completion. Obviously, the two big projects for this summer, totaling collectively nearly $6 million, are the roofing projects, which took place at the 5 sites listed on page 3 of 19, as well as the Climatech project, which was lighting, HVAC, and automation at a few of our sites, and we'll get there in a few minutes. But from this page 3 of 19, the only thing that Greg and I wanted to point out, board approved these projects on April 17th. We used Garland Industries. There was 2 ways we could have gone about these projects. One would have been that we actually asked the bidding contractors to include within their bid the cost of materials, and they'd be responsible for purchasing it. We decided instead, and this was, I think, to the credit of Dave Rogers and Ron Tyndall, that we decided to actually purchase the materials directly ourselves to avoid having them be able to mark up or otherwise.
Didn't they come and, didn't Garland come?
Yeah,
before the
exactly.
board?
Garland came. So Garland has been one of the true bright spots of our projects this summer. I know Greg and David and Ron feel very positively about them. You'll see that third bullet point, they actually were on site, throughout the summer, helping Greg and helping the team, and identified actual workmanship issues and had them redoing some of the work, which actually is what was one of the causes for some of our timing delays of completion, was the quality of their supervision of these projects. And each of the roofs that have been replaced identifies it in this packet, but does come with the Garland guarantee, and so the majority of these roofs, or almost all of them, have the 30-year guarantee. So very, very positive about that.
And I noted that you, even though I think it's Miners Oaks is not guaranteed at this point, that you see it as being in moving in the direction of the 30-year.
That's right, exactly. It will be. So page 419, you're able to just see the financial information of how what was nearly $3 million breaks down between the different parties. You will see R&T. Again, this is one of those things that people ask. Why do we have to have an architect involved in something like roofing, replacements and roofing projects? It really is necessary, again, for that design of the building out the scope and the identification of some of those connection points and that type of work, to have an architect involved. So you can see that they had $74,000 in billables for this project. But as projects go, you'll see that, whereas the COC previously has commented about the percentage of cost for soft cost on projects, you'll see that this one was actually very low as a percent of soft cost, when you're talking about, about 3% of the project went to architects, and otherwise it was all going into the actual hard materials of the construction.
Great.
So we ended up using 3 contractors. Again, I talked about 2 general ways that we could have gone about these projects, by either having the contractor be responsible for materials or us. We went with that. The other choice that we had to make was whether or not we were going to bid out all 5 projects collectively, or bid them out separately. And as you guys know, we bid them out separately, and what we ended up doing was hiring 3 separate contractors. Commercial roofing came in as the low bid for 3 of the sites, but we had other contractors who were smaller who came in as low bid for an individual project. So again, that was another way that we maximized value here. Had we gone with only a single contractor for all 5 sites, we would have been paying more, because commercial roofing came in more expensive on those other 2 schools. So that was another way that, again, we are strategically bidding these projects out. So this page just shows you the financial information. We do have some pictures. I wish this was something more glamorous or exciting than roofs, but trust me, these are roofs that are in various stages of completion. You'll see, again, more photos at Topa. And then we move into the second contract we use, Western States Roofing. Again, about $188,000 project at Matilahaw. You'll see that, again, we're at the substantial completion on August 18th. We have the warranty, and they're just finishing out some punch list items. And once again, some pictures of roofs. The The last one is Myers Oaks, Brazos. This is one that we both have a change order to. It's the only project, actually, of our roofing ones that we had a change order that exceeded the set aside that we had in the initial contract, as well as they are the most delayed in their project. So right now you can see in here that we are looking at anticipated completion at the end of September. And you'll see that our next agenda item, as I'm sure you have, is to actually approve that change order for 9,500. But once again, a few pictures of the Myers Oaks roofing. Remember, these roofs, in addition to actually providing protection for the structures and not having roofs that leak on students, they also do have an energy efficiency component. These are cool roofs that have an R factor that will hopefully aid in our utility cost. With that, and the subject of utility cost, I was going to ask Greg to talk a little bit about the Climatech contract and the lighting, heating, and HVAC project across the district this summer.
Good evening, everyone. The lighting project began before I joined the district, and it has been very successful. We've had minimal incidents of glitches with that component. The impressive thing to me is the conversion from fluorescent tubes to LED tubes that reduce the wattage per lamp by 67%. That's quite a savings. We won't know the savings for a 12-month period, which is when they're going to distribute the first energy audit report. There was a bit of a learning curve with the new controls, the thermostats and the occupancy sensors. But
Sorry, before you move
Yes,
on to
sir.
the lighting,
yes,
as I recall, there was a concern initially about the color of the LEDs being different than fluorescents. Has
Correct.
that been resolved?
you're under LEDs now, and no one has raised the issue to me.
Yeah, so the work began in January or February. Actually, was it even before December? No, I'm thinking about. It was an initial consideration, so I believe the actual bulb that was selected was one that was with some feedback from users to make sure it was compatible with what we're used to in classroom lighting. But the entire project was closed out early 2018, and it's been in place now for more than 6 months at most of our sites, and we've not received, to my knowledge, we haven't received any complaints.
No,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
And after working through the first day of school and getting people familiar with the limitations of the new controls, the fans run constantly as part of Title 24 compliance for air circulation, but the air conditioning won't come on unless the door is closed to signal to the air conditioner it's okay to run. And the occupancy sensors are set for the hours between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So there's constantly air circulating.
Does that mean that at midnight the fan is not running, or the fan is running 24 hours?
No, the fan is not running. And then I don't know, regrettably, I apologize, I don't know the period of time from evacuation of the room to when the air conditioning shuts down. It's possibly 15 minutes, but I'll find that out and distribute that information. The project, as you know, $2.9 million, and after last month's board meeting, Superintendent Andy Cantwell contacted Climatech, and immediately thereafter, they elevated their response and their communication level to assist us to hit the marks for the first day of school. We further had a meeting here with representatives from Climatech on August 23rd, and they demonstrated the strength of character to admit to their shortcomings and they're continuing this week, providing support on the ground for those issues that have crept up. And those issues are presently limited to manufacturer defects, things that just couldn't be foreseen. So they're having to ship parts from out of state to accommodate the repairs. And they're talking to us daily.
You guys.
Moving on from the air conditioning projects, we do have, you saw the photos, I do want to acknowledge the maintenance team were occupied quite a bit the 3 weeks prior to school starting, because whether or not a school received new HVAC units, they received new controls. And the interface of those controls with the existing equipment sometimes resulted with cross responsibilities. And this particular photograph is our maintenance team identifying a fuse that was defective, and it's a condition that you can't determine with a visual inspection. You need the diagnostic tool to see if you're getting the electricity. That was easily resolved, but it was at all sites, and it took the maintenance department, again, the best part of 3 weeks. Are there any questions about the HVAC?
Each time I look at this picture, I think they're standing in snow.
Right, in their shorts.
Yeah, exactly.
It does give a different feel like the summer.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about the HVAC? Okay.
Do you know, Greg, sorry, if the
I'm sorry.
fans have different speeds?
To the
The
best.
You said the fans that are running
Yes.
all the time, are there different speeds? Because I've been in some classrooms where, like, you can't hear the teacher, the fan's so loud, and other classrooms where the fan, I don't hear the fan, or I don't notice it, so you don't know.
I don't know. To the best of my understanding, the new units are a single speed. So there are, during our August the 23rd meeting, Climate Tech did inform us that to provide the district the best return on the investment, they made the selection to replace single units. There's another system that's referred to as a split unit, where you have a heating element that's separate from the cooling unit on the roof. They're labor intensive, they are costlier. So to maximize the available dollars, they concentrated on those single units, whether they be a heat pump or just a conventional HVAC unit. My experience is the split units are the noisy ones. But if you could identify a site where you experienced this noise, oh,
I can identify.
please.
Room.
Well, I'll email you tomorrow, Angie, and if you want to survey your staff, that'd be great.
Definitely,
Oh.
there's one room in particular where the fan runs all day and they come in at lunch and they're like, I can't hear and my students can't hear me. And when I go to somebody else's room, it's quiet. I don't understand why my room is so loud. So.
It's like, this one's loud when this one runs, you know, so it's sort of like,
I'm
It's really
thinking
noticeable
all
when
day
it
is
stops.
exactly the noise they're talking
Yeah.
about, this kind of noise.
yeah.
And
Okay,
they just don't
exhausting.
want the fan to run anymore.
understood. Look forward to getting that information and see what available options there are. Any other issues with
Just
HVAC?
to be clear though, we need to figure out if there's an issue with the unit, or potentially if that was one that wasn't replaced, if we increase the priority of replacement for that. But the continual running is actually a legal requirement that we were not compliant with previously, that we are gaining compliance on, but one that we really, unfortunately, don't have much, wiggle room in as far as gaining compliance. It is a health code, or it's a state building code connected to health, to have, new air circulating into rooms on a continual basis.
You know, the issue with that, in my house, if you put it on fan on the whole time and the AC is not running,
Uh-huh.
it becomes swampy. It's like, it's worse. It's not that worse air quality, so.
Is there a way though to buffer that sound or?
That's exactly what we're
There's
gonna work on.
something
Of
we
course,
can
we
do
can find a solution.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do. Absolutely.
Earphones for the whole class. I'm sure the teaching will go so smooth after that.
So I think for the rest of this agenda item, you'll see that we just, as a reminder, something that is, consuming a lot of time and attention of both our team as well as the architects, which R&T should be here any moment, is the Nordhoff Library renovation, which that budget figure is the renovation for the library and also the quad space adjoining it. And you can see that we are currently back into DSA's review and expecting our next update by mid-September.
There is an update to this update.
Oh, great.
We received an email this afternoon from R&T, and it looks like we're going to be in on the 12th
September 12th?
for the library, yes.
Nice.
Great.
Okay. And then,
September 12th? Tyson?
oh,
Just
gosh.
as we said.
We were saying that we're giving a general, general update on the library and status of design review, and we're hearing that the latest is DSA meeting is going to be in about a week.
Yes,
Great.
yes, sorry, yes.
And Tyson, sorry to put you on the spot actually right away. I was joking initially, but now I actually am going to intentionally put you on the spot. That meeting on the 12th, is the anticipation that we could be given the green light from that meeting to be able to move forward toward bidding, or is this one more iterative meeting before we,
There's
or,
a potential. We usually don't, but there is a potential. That doesn't mean you could move on to bidding at that time, but we would probably assess it after that meeting. But yeah,
so we initially were thinking that we might be going to bidding, this was nearly a year ago, we're talking about going to bidding as early as October, and now we're using more of a December or maybe even early January. Where would you currently peg us? I understand that DSA is DSA. I mean, it could be 6 more months in their never-ending cycle, but are we still looking at kind of a December period of when we would be, when construction would begin, not when we're bidding?
I'm trying to.
Or awarding
review the
contracts.
hours. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, sorry, well, that's fine.
I do think that, I mean, that's still the time frame. I mean, I still
Okay.
think we
That-
were in that window. I still think we're, this year, that was still
Great.
on our schedule for this
Great.
year.
Perfect.
So, sorry.
Thank you. No, I put you on the
I'm
spot,
gonna
sorry.
leave now?
The reason that you guys are here is the last slide that you see for this presentation is, again, we're just talking about the projects that we are focusing our energies on is the Matilah kitchen and possible dining renovation. So that was just one final slide that was in these materials. For this set of materials as well, as you'll see that we, as we do each meeting, just have an update on the expenses, current year expenses starting this summer. And that brings us through to the end of the agenda. Any questions on the current summer projects nearly complete?
Nope.
Nope.
Should we move on to
Moving on
next
to
one?
7.4.6, the Brazos.
Yep, so this, as we've talked about, this is the change order. Again, doing nearly $3 million in projects, having only one change order, and the amount of, what we need is an authorization for another $9,500.
I'll move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. So we are going to, looks like they're able to get up their PowerPoint. I just want to tee up this topic a little bit. So again, we talked last meeting about the Matilah kitchen. Julie, thank you for being here. If we do have questions about the kitchen specifically. I think there was consensus generally building toward, although we didn't take a formal vote, but general consensus on seeing the value. Recall, we said budget for this project was in the neighborhood of $500,000. Doing the bare minimum necessary for code compliance was going to put us at about $1.5 million. And what we said was that for only about $500,000 delta, we go from putting lipstick on pig option, the Band-Aid option, to truly being able to redesign the way the kitchen's utilized, giving ourselves the greatest flexibility long-term with having a central prep and central storage capacity. Again, if we do end up leasing out this space, we do have current central storage here. That would become a really important need as we consider the potential moving off of this site. So this is a proactive move to take care of that need, or a significant portion of the need. But also, as we talked about last meeting, it really gives us an opportunity to enter into a new era, a new phase for our nutrition service program, as far as greater from scratch cooking, the ability for us to have that central kitchen that does the majority of the actual preparation, and then the elementaries become true satellite kitchens that receive the food and warm it. So that was the majority of our conversation last meeting, was around the kitchen concept of either the 1.5 or the $2 million option. What we're coming back to today is to continue that conversation, as well as then expand it to the possibility of the dining hall options. What we have in your materials today, based on the conversation from last meeting, we do have that Measure J bond plan from last year that has the listing of projects. We also have last meeting's presentation, and forgive me, we did fail to actually have the current presentation sent out to you on Friday, but did go out earlier today, as well as R&T is going to be going over it here soon. So just a reminder, what we were trying to show last meeting, if we jump in our materials to page 17 of 21.
Can we get those? Are you holding those for a reason?
I'll hand those out as we move over there, yep. But for right now, I'm looking at page 17 of 21. Just as a reminder, what we talked about last meeting was the need for, obviously, again, this budget is going to be, either way, is going to be greater than what we had set aside, that $500,000. So I pulled out from the 12-page bond plan the places where I saw the easiest means to pull budget. Now, on this list on page 17 of 21, the majority of these projects have actually already been completed, and they actually came in lower than anticipated, and that's why we see the budget available. Obviously, the really important one that gives us the greatest flexibility budget-wise, not just with this project, but other ones potentially as well, is the elementary school PV projects, which has a budget of about $3.25 million in the bond plan. If we were to be willing to pull some or all of those projects, then instantly we have budget, again, not just for this project, there are potentially other needs out there as well, but when we're looking at these projects, really all three options that we're going to be talking about today for the dining hall, plus the actual central prep, central storage, from scratch cooking kitchen, all become accessible to us. So I think that's part of this conversation as well today, is talking about our comfort level with pulling budget from some of these other projects to be able to accomplish any of these options. Okay? Any initial questions? That was just me teeing it up for R&T to be able to come up and actually go through the various options available to us for shaded or climate-controlled eating or seating.
I have one question. When I was at meeting with Rotary this last week, they said that they were in the process of
Actually, it looks like we are going to be...
fundraising for
Oh, do you already have one?
shade
Yeah,
structures
I can hand them down.
for Matilla Hall. Do you know
So,
anything about that?
yeah, so we have had conversations with the Rotary, OEF, and the PTA. What they're looking at is the shade sail, the cloth material. And so that still potentially could be an option here, separate from any of these. It really is not going to be size-wise looking at, a very expansive area.
Is it in the same location as the dining hall would be, or the dining?
They're looking at a few different
Expanded?
options. I'm not actually sure the exact specifics. I know that David's walked the campus with those groups and been talking about a few different potential places for looking at that. We see that certainly more as a short-term way to immediately provide some shade. It's not going to be the solution, both from a maintenance perspective long-term. Those cloth shades don't last very long. They don't provide the protection from the rain or from those conditions. Yeah, the UV And, it can definitely be an element to the bigger picture of the site, but we don't think that it's the solution by itself. Okay, with that, we have just handed out the latest packet that we sent out earlier today or this afternoon. And if you guys want to jump in.
Sure.
Sure, yeah. Good evening, Superintendent, members of the board. I'm Tara Brown, I'm with R&T Architects.
I'm
And
Tyson Klein,
this is-
RT Architects. I'm gonna sit, it's easier.
Okay.
Sure.
Loudly, yes. So I understand that you guys just got this packet today, so I know you may not have had a chance to go through everything. Forgive me if I dwell a little bit too much on things. This is the Matilaha campus and a couple shots of your existing dining hall and the existing kitchen space. And just to tee up the conversation here, the anticipated enrollment for 2019 school year is 450 to 550 students because we have the sixth graders coming over. The current dining hall on campus seats 88, and in fact, that's the code occupancy. There's really only seating in there right now for about 60 students. And there's not any shaded seating outside on campus. There are several picnic tables, some of which are partially shaded by oak trees right now. So that is the existing condition.
And just a quick question.
Yeah.
Is lunch staggered or is it all at once?
It's all at once.
Okay.
And just to help kind of tee this thing up, we've been working on a kitchen project. You guys know about that, so we're not really talking about that. We're just talking about kind of the dining component of this. We have done, per request of the district, we've done some very quick conceptual studies. They're nothing more than that. We wanted to test the water with you. So you're going to see options in here. There may be versions of these options. There may be other versions that we've studied, so you can ask us about this because we've studied a lot of different things. But we wanted to pick kind of the three different extremes so we can test the water with you. These are not finished designs at all. So I just want to preface that by saying that.
What we're hoping to really get out of the conversation tonight is what the district's priorities are, and hopefully that will guide the board toward one or the other of these options or something in between them. Just for reference, these are the current plans for the new central kitchen addition attached to the existing dining room here. I'm going to gloss over this because I understand there was consensus at the last board meeting that this was the direction the project was moving, but we're here, of course, if you have any questions. So jumping into the options, we have three on the table today. A shade structure, an addition to the existing dining hall, and an option where the dining hall is demolished and a new structure is built. So those are the three options we'll be presenting. Again, these are just some concepts. Please don't look at the paint color. Of course, all these options are subject to the design process, right? So, if you see any little things that you don't like, please understand those can be changed. We just want to get your feedback on what direction the project may want to go. So option A is the addition of a shade structure on campus. We have shown this location. It's in the center of what's currently a large paved area. It would be convenient because we basically already have accessible path of travel there, but we can examine other options for where this structure could go on campus.
It can't go
This
right off the existing dining?
I'm sorry,
It
repeat.
can't go right off the existing dining hall?
It could possibly go off the existing dining hall. We actually had feedback from the district because we had spoken about potentially locating it on this existing patio.
Right.
There was some feedback that there's concern about the view from Ojai Avenue, which is this view here. This is the existing dining hall, and you can see, your nice tile roof and the nicely proportioned windows of the existing dining hall. So I think there was some thought that we might not want to block that view. Also, there's a couple of oak trees right there. is one, and there's another that we would have to work around in that location. So we can put that location on the table, but just know we already got some negative feedback on that one.
And there are issues in locating these things. There's the big quad to the southeast. We point that out.
Yeah,
It's probably better to look at a picture. I think that
I know.
the photo. Okay, for me, it's a lot easier to orient when I'm looking at the photo.
Sure, we can go back here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the quad.
So this is the quad.
We studied that area. And Tara went as far as actually look at some of the code requirements, because when you start adding, you basically are adding to an existing building from a code standpoint. So there's limiting factors in terms of where we could put it over there.
That's if we put it here. We had looked at this patio. I mean, it may be possible also to locate it, say, right here. That would have some issues with accessibility. We would have to alter probably this path of travel down through here. Nothing insurmountable, but potentially a little bit of an added cost. The option that's on the table right now actually uses this flat area, which used to have a garage building on it, so it's already a flat pad, and it's already on an accessible path of travel, so just, a few less hurdles with this site.
And how far is that from the cafeteria?
It's about 150 feet
75
from the
feet.
cafeteria. This
Gotcha,
is the
50 yards.
cafeteria building. But just for reference, currently students spread out all over this quad. So there's picnic tables here, over here, under these trees. It's just a little bit further this way. And one of the things that we heard from the district was actually that, this is the parking lot where students get picked up. And they currently don't really have a good place to wait for pickup, so that's one of the benefits of doing a shade structure over here. Right now, there's like a bunch of log pieces sitting in this dirt area under a tree that provides some shade for pickup. But that would be one of the benefits of the shade structure approach, is that it could do double duty after school.
Please understand, we wanted to show you all extremes. The bare minimum, a la option A, all the way up to the biggest. So we wanted to kind of have at least 3 tiers to present.
Yeah, so this is the least cost option. It's adding about $250,000 to the budget of $2.06 million for the kitchen and dining renovation.
Does that mean that shade structure would cost, give or take, $250,000?
Yes, and it's approximately the same. It's a little bit bigger than the existing dining hall. If you've been in that building, the existing dining hall is 1,400 square feet. We're talking about 1,800 square feet of shade structure. I mean, of course, that can be adjusted up or down depending on the board's preference and the money available. So that would approximately double the seating capacity of a sheltered seating area, albeit, this would not be air conditioned. This is the
one is at Topa Topa?
I was just thinking the same thing. How many students can we fit under that one at Topa?
Let's check that. That's a big one.
That's big?
Yeah.
It's so
Because that's nice.
bigger than this one.
I believe that, I don't think we were talking about TOPA, but when we were having one of our calls last week, David Rogers was part of, he said that the ones at, it was either Miramonte or Myers Oaks, was about 2,000 square feet. So this would be slightly lower, or slightly less than theirs, but about the same size.
So we think that you could get about 96 students under there, so say 100 students, give or take. There could be 88 in the existing dining room, so that gets you about 188 students in a covered area at least, out of 450 to 550 anticipated enrollment.
So one thing to remember with with option A, even with focusing on the shade structure, we do still do the improvements that we previously discussed to the dining hall, which is a few structural things, as well as bringing in HVAC to the dining hall. So it'd be keeping the current dining hall, some new furniture in there, AC, but then it'd really be focusing on meeting our needs for covered seating elsewhere.
And lunch is at about noon, so we're thinking, but in that other pad over closer to the gym would block that west facing the sun in the afternoon, yeah?
The pad closer to the gym. Over-
Where the garage area, you
Here?
said that there's that flat pad.
We're still about 40 feet from the gym here.
So it won't.
The gym won't
it
block the
won't.
sun, no.
So you'll have a lot of west-facing afternoon sun.
Late afternoon.
Yeah,
late
late afternoon, yeah. But at lunchtime, it'll be pretty well overhead. And I, just so you know, you're not seeing all the work we did. We've distilled this, but, you know, we have done some preliminary code analysis on these options, and we have also done a furniture layout for how seating could work under there. And, you know, we are taking into account that you're not putting benches right to the edge of that shade structure. You know, they're tucked 4 feet underneath or so, you know, so that when there is a sun angle coming under that shade structure, it's not baking half the students. So this option that's on the table, what that price tag buys you is basically a prefab modular shade structure. One of the advantages of this is that you can get DSA pre-check structures, which basically means that it shortens the DSA plan check process considerably. We could peel this off as a separate project from the kitchen renovation, and the shade structure could potentially be up in, you know, say 7 or 8 months, which is a shorter timeline than the kitchen, because it is possible with shade structures like this to just have an over-the-counter plan check at DSA rather than having to go through the full process.
And obviously materials and colors can be made to fit. This is just a photograph.
Canon should be adjusted. And I think we're actually showing, you know, maybe something brown here to match the building trim. This is just an example of one of those types of shade structures. Another advantage with these is that we can get a standing seam metal roof, and I know the district has been kicking around the idea of putting PV panels on buildings or structures, and I spoke with one photovoltaics, sorry, and I spoke with one shade structure manufacturer who said that we would be able, under the DSA pre-check, probably to install photovoltaic panels that simply clip to the ribs of the roofing. So if the district did want to in the future put panels on this shade structure, it would probably be an easy retrofit. So,
Just to be clear, did you say potable?
photovoltaics.
Photovoltaic.
So solar
yeah,
panels.
I thought you were talking about water for a second now.
Photovoltaics.
Yeah, like they got, I don't know if you've seen the Ohio Athletic Club, but
Yes.
they
Yeah.
apparently still not online.
Uh-oh.
Seriously.
A lot of the roofing systems, the point is a lot of the standing metal seam, you know, that have ribs, there's actually a clip system that attaches right to those.
Yeah.
You're not doing any penetrations, and it's structural. So
Yeah.
DSA approves those structural connections.
Yeah.
And it's budget friendly, so if the board decides at some point that they want to do solar panels, then it saves the cost of having to build a separate structure for those panels.
Right.
You know, or retrofit an existing roof. You know, other types of roof, you have to actually penetrate the roofing to install the supports for the panels. So that's often a place that water intrusion can happen and then, you know, degrade the building over time. Whereas if you attach them to these metal roofing panels, there are no penetrations of the roof. So you just nip that in the bud. It's less of a maintenance problem. So that's option A, shade structure. Are there any questions before I move on here? I'll try and get through these. Okay, option B, and we looked at several locations for this, but this appears to be the best one. An addition on the west side of the existing dining hall. So essentially, copy the existing footprint of the dining hall and plop it down right next door. It creates a very long, narrow building, approximately double the seating capacity of what's there. And we would be able to air condition the whole building. There are a few challenges with this approach because currently the site drainage goes this way. So we'd have to do a little bit of regrading here, reroute a sewer line. You know, nothing insurmountable, but several little challenges with this approach.
Just a
Yeah.
question that I've had. Does anybody know what all those buildings seem to have been built in perfect alignment, Except they just threw that thing in at an angle.
Yeah,
Any idea?
Tyson and I were just talking about
We've
this
been
morning.
debating this
We've been
since
debating
the
this.
We've been trying to figure out why, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There's a vortex there, you didn't know.
It may have been a tree, it may have been a utility line, but it's an anomaly, it's weird. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool, but it's weird. And you'll notice in option C that we take care of that, so.
Greg actually sent me a bunch of the old utility plans because I was trying to figure it out too. You know, maybe there's something there. I don't know, but
Reminds me of an NPR once when I was listening. They were looking at this design of Christopher Wren, and they were saying it is almost nearly exactly at the summer solstice. And I'm like, almost nearly?
nearly?
Wouldn't it just have been the summer solstice, for God's sake?
interesting.
Almost nearly.
So, so this design would double the seating capacity. I think it's a little bit challenging in that you end up with a very long, narrow building. I mean, I was joking to some other people that it really puts the hall in dining hall.
Are the
and
only entrances at the end? There's no.
that can be designed.
Yeah.
I mean, currently there are 3 doors at this end of the building. And there is 1 door right here. You know, when we add on, we can put an additional entrance and probably wood down at that end.
There's just portions of good space, right? There's just, this feels
Yeah.
right. This one's tough. It's not ideal, but maybe we're not dealing in ideals here. Maybe we're just trying to make the best dining, opportunity. So maybe you should explain why the other ones don't work, to explain why we ended up here.
Well,
Just briefly.
so briefly, we looked at adding on to this end, which basically runs it into this building, which creates some code compliance issues. Also, the drainage here goes this way, so we'd have to be piping stormwater underneath our new building. We looked at potentially orienting it this way to sort of close off the quad. Nobody really liked that approach because it would
Create 2 rooms.
it creates essentially 2 different rooms when you have an L-shaped building. We looked at even bringing the new kitchen over here. That's really, it wants to be where it is right now for ease of service and separation of space. So we've landed on this being the best option for an addition to the existing dining hall. We also examined potentially adding to the south, which you might think that would make one nice, big, nicely proportioned room. But actually, there's a lot of issues with this existing roof here and how you would join the new building to the existing without putting any additional structural load on the existing building, because if we do that, then we're into having to do some heavy-duty retrofit of the existing building that's quite expensive. So that's the short version of how we landed where we are today. Let me know if you want the long version and have about 3 hours. So these are some views of what that would look like. This dining space is about 9 feet tall and about 25 feet wide, same as the existing. We mocked up for you what it would look like. I just took this view of your existing dining hall and plunked it right down there to make it twice as long, and it would be similar to this space. So it'll feel, kind of long and narrow.
One thing I thought was important to point out, you did a good job of it with this mocked up picture. We're not able to have actually a fully integrated what would feel like a single room. There would be still an element of feeling like kind of 2 separate areas.
Correct.
Yes.
Right, because of the structural reasons why we can't fully blow out that wall to have it. Instead, it's going to be creating some blind spots within the room and that sort of thing, right?
Yes, we need to leave some of this wall approximately as much as I've shown here. Because if it is possible, as everyone knows, with enough money to blow out that wall and put a big moment frame in. But again, when we get into that much revision of the existing structure, now we have to go back and completely upgrade the existing dining hall structure. which is costly, time-consuming.
Which puts
And
us
unpredictable.
into option C.
Yeah.
So that's-
That pushes us to option C, which is scrape it all and build something new. Option C is demolish the existing dining hall and build a new one twice as big. So this does get a larger and more regular shaped building that would be usable for, say, assemblies. It has the same dining capacity as option B, but it would be more usable as an assembly space. It would be more usable for testing, you know, in terms of being able to supervise students. It could be used for community events. And we'd be looking at something like this. We went ahead and just showed, you know, some metal trusses in here, some wood out there. I mean, since we're doing an entirely new building here, there's a lot more scope for design in this option. The other benefit to this option is that it would be fully compliant to current codes. The other ones that we're looking at are basically the new addition or the new shade structure would be compliant to current codes, but you still have a 70-year-old dining hall.
And
So-
what's the capacity to this one as compared to the shade structure plus the dining hall as is?
It's about the same.
It's about.
So we tried to present 3 options that have about the same capacity. The shade structure, of course, has half the kids, you know, in
And we also have patio.
yeah, and, well, this one, so because we have a lot of design latitude with a new building, we are showing it with a shaded patio over here, which gets you some additional shaded seating outdoors.
So is that the dining hall itself has the capacity of what the current dining hall and
Yes.
structure? So this would actually add more
This-
if we did that extra patio
Yes,
area?
this adds a
I
little
was
bit
thinking
more.
it's all together.
I think I was estimating about 64 kids could sit out on that patio.
You mentioned the being up to code.
Yeah,
I assume we're grandfathered in terms of the legal obligation to fix it because it's a pre-existing building, but you're just
Yes.
saying presumably it's not as safe earthquake-wise, it's
correct, yeah.
ADA, I don't know how the ADA stuff works though, ADA kind of,
We will actually have to upgrade the existing dining hall in terms of ADA or
Right.
accessibility.
Right.
Because we're doing a big enough project and you have to spend a certain percentage of that project upgrading the current facility. So it will be compliant in terms of ADA no matter which option we choose. What I was alluding to is the current building code and particularly the seismic code. So the existing building was built in 47, I believe, and codes have changed significantly since then because of several large earthquakes, particularly the Northridge quake in '94. There were major changes to the code after that based on what we saw with buildings during that earthquake.
And you are
So,
grandfathered in
you-
to a certain threshold.
yeah.
And so, you know, that is the question, right? There's an economic factor and there's a doing the right thing factor that we all have to work within. Because the building can be made to meet its requirement when it was built. It will take a lot to get it to meet the current code.
If we tried to get it to meet current code, we
We'd be building.
honestly might as well just build the new one. It's basically where that stands.
thanks.
So, but to wrap up, I mean, the benefit of the outdoor patio is you get 64, that's almost what you could get in the current interior space of the current.
It's pretty close, yeah.
Outdoor patio could get you what you have now.
Well, and please understand, this is just one design. You know, if we decide we want that patio on the other end, that's possible too. This just seemed a pretty expedient way to do it. And that patio is on the south side of the building, shading these windows, so there's energy benefits to that.
I like it.
Yeah, and then I wanted to just show you some images of what the possibilities are with that new building. I mean, you know, I was trying to demonstrate the other 2 options. Well, this one, I don't know where we're going with this, right? We have a whole design process. It could be wood, it could be steel. It would be modern building materials and energy efficiency standards. So it does have that benefit. We could make the structure metal, which is much less maintenance intensive than wood. Again, there's a whole process to the new building and a lot of latitude that we wouldn't necessarily have with the other options.
What about prefab?
Prefab new building?
Definitely
We could-
prefab structural components, all those trusses could be prefab. I mean, there are prefab building systems, there's not a ton of prefab cafeteria space, buildings out there, but, panelized systems and prefab components for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty much assuming that we would have something with, say, like a prefab series of trusses here. So
That's
we've,
hard to read.
oh, that's hard to read the colors here, that's really weird. Well, they read a lot better in the packet you've got in front of you on the table, actually. We put together a chart here showing option A, which is the shade structure option, option B, the addition, and then option C, the entirely new building, along with the perceived benefits or drawbacks to each of those.
Our perceived.
Our perceived benefits and drawbacks to each of those. So we really hope that this sparks a conversation about which of these items are priorities for the district, and hopefully that will lead us in one direction or another.
So this is flipped, Andy, right, from our original one?
That's right.
The ABC?
Yep.
Just keeping us sack.
Exactly. Well, make sure you're paying attention.
But the B's the same though.
But actually, we went from a high of 2.5 to now our high being 3.2.
That's right. So what we were looking at last meeting was we knew that the again central prep, central storage kitchen was going to be with the from scratch capabilities, everything else about $2 million. And so this is actually a totally different set of options than what we were presenting last time, because last time A was the dining hall with central prep, B was just the central prep, and C was just do what we can for the current kitchen. So this is a totally new set of option A, B, and C. But you're right, as we asked them to dig into it deeper, what we previously had said was about $500,000 delta between the existing dining hall and adding doubling the space has turned to now being a $750,000 delta. So that's been what, as we were introductory a few weeks ago, and as we've asked R&T, and they've done incredible work to get the quality of work back as quickly as they have. But as they're building it out, what they're seeing is now that option that was option A in our last meeting is 2.8 instead of a 2.5.
And what page were those possible items that we would not build?
17.
Thank you. Just one page back.
So I'm not sure if anybody's had a chance to read through this since we just got it this afternoon. Would you like me to go through our little chart here with you guys,
No.
or do we want to
No.
open this up for discussion, questions?
Yeah, I've read over it too. So we're good. Have we heard from the admin at Matilaha? Is there
I did
anything
speak to
that-
Javier. Javier gave some feedback as to the location if we did go with option A. He wasn't in love with the one that we were putting out, but again, this was just purely to give you guys those 3 levels of possibilities. So each of these are going to require some more design work with Julie and her team, as well as with site administration. Of course, Javier's response when I sent him the packet on Friday, he said, "Am I dreaming? I mean, this is just incredible." I mean, he was very excited about any of the 3 options, sees, very significant opportunities with each, but he also understands the financial element with either B or C is, significant.
Was there a discussion as to whether and how the space would be used?
So we talked about, again, what their actual needs were, he felt, for seating for students during lunch. I said, the natural question one might ask is, well, we have 500 students, and we're only talking about in any of these scenarios having roughly enough seating for 40%. Maybe in that option C, we go up to 50% of the students. He said that he's certain that no matter what we do here, there is still going to be, a percentage of students who want to just eat in their own area, away from a big grouping. When some kids are in line, some are eating, and by the time the kids, buy their meal, get sitting down, those kids are already playing basketball elsewhere. So he thought the number for lunch actually did fit in line, especially if there are, still again, outdoor seating under trees or in hallways or as we currently do. So the seating during lunch, he thought this was the right ballpark number. As far as other uses, I mean, he certainly says that, right now, the auditorium is very limited in the uses for a space like that, and the gym is utilized frequently, for PE or for athletic, different athletic programs, and it too has its limitations given how big it is and how cavernous it can feel if you want to get 30 students together working on a STEM project or something like that. So he sees a lot of possibility for having an open space that has flexibility, just like Nordhoff's cafeteria has, and he can certainly dream up many ways that can be utilized.
There's of course the option with C to use that as a teaching space for larger classes. In fact, we've illustrated it here with perhaps a teaching wall at the end. You could put a low platform there and be able to use that space for multiple functions. It is the most flexible.
So can you go back for me, Andy, and say, so originally we said 500,000.
500,000 for the kitchen and 200,000 for dining hall improvements / shaded,
That's that on
we
page 17.
yeah we
195.
identified it as expanded covered dining area, the 195.
Okay. So then we knew, well, we can't do it for 700,000. We could
Right.
maybe do something for what we talked about last time.
We definitely can,
was
exactly, the 1.5. And so that would be keeping the current footprint really as it is of the kitchen, not giving ourselves that expanded central storage, central prep, and some of the new equipment we were talking about, and the improving the queuing issues and those sorts of things. What it really does is just allow us to have confidence the kitchen can remain open for the next decade, meeting
Oh, I
current.
thought the 1.5 was definitely, I mean, we all kind of sort of said, we want a new central kitchen. That was sort of the consensus,
So
even though we didn't vote.
right, we didn't do a vote, but exactly, I agree. I think that was generally where the conversation was going. That last meeting as well as this meeting is the $2 million price tag. Yeah, the 1.5 is the bare minimum to be code compliant in the kitchen.
I'm not interested. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just, yuck.
So again, really the purpose is, we have our architects, they certainly can answer any questions about the kitchen concept and that central storage, central prep. But again, today it was as a follow-up to that to see what your appetite or willingness to commit some of these, we have dollars here that, could potentially be available, or we have the entire 12-page list of other bond projects, but of a few places of how we could carve out sufficient budget for any one of these three projects. But again, we obviously have $100 million of need plus across this district, and not knowing the extent to which we want to approve our architects to move forward exploring any of these individual paths without your authorization.
I see we have a few people in the audience that you may want to comment on this item. Jim, did you want to comment? Lori?
I don't know enough about the money to comment. Obviously it'd be great to do a big one. You could afford it.
There were a lot of different pictures for option C, but we're basically looking at one price tag. It seems like, I mean, what are the chances that we're going to want to build what we can afford to build on that option? I mean, all of those don't look like they would be the same price.
No, not necessarily, and I think, no matter which one of these we choose, some refinement may be needed. It will be needed, yes, it will be needed. As I'm sure you've realized, it's impossible to put an exact dollar tag on a project that's not yet designed.
But even ballpark.
But we think this is a reasonable ballpark, to just gauge the board's willingness and appetite to invest in a larger project that you know, that has some benefits, which may or may not be priorities for the district, versus a smaller project that has different opportunities and different costs.
Do these costs include furnishings?
Yes.
Or is this just the building?
That, yes, is
There's
included.
total project numbers.
Total project.
It's
Wait,
total, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead, sorry.
They're total project numbers, including furnishings, including design fees, DSA fees, inspection, yeah.
And they're, again, ballpark, because
Right.
we don't
Right.
really know, but we feel really good about at least giving you this ballpark. They'll go up or they'll go down, but this is a ballpark, and then we can work with you on saying it can go up a little bit, or it needs to go down a little bit, and we'll figure out that. And that's when we have these discussions about, let's assume you picked option B or C, then we would then have these conversations. What design priorities do you have? This is kind of like project direction priorities. Well, we don't need it to be super glossy. It just needs to be bare bones, and we work with that. And we keep fixing the budget, right? There's the budget number to shoot to each time. So.
Wouldn't we want to do this in a similar way to the kind of stakeholder engagement that you guys engaged
100%.
on the library?
100%.
Really?
Today,
That seems
Yeah, I would
way
think
more
so.
complicated, but.
it's not. It's not. I mean, I think it's better, well, personal opinion, it's better to get a larger stakeholder input. We have to work with you on what the priorities are. I mean, not every voice can be heard, but if we can get general consensus, we work through that. That's how we typically do these types of projects. Today is really just about seeing, none of you fell over when we showed you option C. None of you really went yay when we showed you option A either. So it's about trying to figure out where your threshold of pain is. Like what's It's really what it's about. Like what is important to you? Is it worth reprioritizing other projects to get something on this campus, a middle school? I'm speaking out of turn, but this is not a design exercise. This is a option exercise. Tara cranked these things out very quickly and came up with dollars very quickly so that we can get in front of you really quickly to have these types of discussions. And that's where we're at.
Annie, this is if you're not prepared, I'm not, so I'm just looking at these Nordoff, 12.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Matilaha, 4.5 million. That's very different in terms of student numbers. Does Nordoff serve twice as many students? It'll be about the same number of students?
So when this is approaching a year-old document, and actually the foundation of it was a year and a half prior to that as it was being built. At the time, the way that Josh and Ron and others were identifying the project on this list, they did account for the square footage of the sites, because even though you're right, one way could have been allocating some form of on a per student basis, what they were looking at was actually the facility itself, and realizing that our Nordoff has something like 120,000 square feet, and Matilaha is considerably less. So that was one thing. They also were actually looking at the current condition of the facilities, and so that's why you might see that even though the three larger elementaries all have pretty similar size campuses, that you don't see them all getting the exact same amount, is that they are actually accounting for the fact that certain sites have received different treatment in the past and have different current state for their needs. So that is, and then again, we were just looking at the overall actual needs at those sites. So from a student perspective, perhaps Matilaha is shortchanged in the current $4 million allocation, roughly. Matilaha will be serving 3 grades. And of course, I know you guys, we've talked about this extensively back in the spring. It does become a very unique campus. We have some kids who are at Monica Ross or other elementary private schools. We have kids who, for high school might peel off and go to Villanova or Thatcher or other places. It does seem that Matilaha is a school that serves the greatest percentage of students in the valley of that age group, relative to the other sites. And then of course also at Nordoff, students start going to Chaparral by junior year as well. So Matilaha has certainly a special place within serving the community. From a student population size, it will be roughly 75% of the size of Nordoff. Nordoff will be an extra third enrollment-wise, maybe slightly less long-term, but that's just a function of 3 grades versus 4. So if we were going to look at trying to commit more dollars to Matilaha, then we certainly could be looking at some of these Nordoff projects. Again, I thought what I was providing was the lowest hanging fruit. We could also be talking about a different conversation about this site and the dollars currently budgeted here, or Summit and the dollars currently budgeted there. I mean, those might also over the next couple of years change as our, whether or not we're able to reopen Summit, whether or not we move off of here. So there certainly are multiple places from which budget could come.
And the Topa kitchen was supposed to have a second phase? That
Right.
wouldn't happen.
That's right.
What aspect of the Topa kitchen wouldn't happen?
Wouldn't need to.
So if you remember, we had in the budget itself, there was 2 separate items for Topa. It's been fully complete. Even if we don't go to central prep, there's no need for that second phase. I think that, again, when this document was created, we were initially not going to be doing the hood, the ventilation hood, and we're going to be looking at having that be a separate process or a separate project in, I think, 2019. And so Ron was able to get everything in at, the incredible price that we've talked about already. He was able to save us more than 50% from the budget of that project by doing so much of the labor himself. So we do have.
If we didn't do a central kitchen at Matilaha, we would not do the Topa.
That's right. Those are
phase 2.
that's true savings that we
Okay.
already have available to us.
Okay.
Yep. And that, if you're on page 16 of 21, you can see Topa that we had $100,000 for summer 17, and summer 19 we had $260,000 identified from that bond plan. So those are funds available.
Interesting that you didn't put that on the low-hanging fruit.
That's true. That's money available.
And what?
That I didn't actually include within this any of the cafeteria budget. That's why it's a separate line item, because also we do have multiple sites within the cafeteria plans that those would change. Miramani and Myers Oaks improvements would be reduced, or the need for improvements would be reduced if they become a receiving kitchen and a warming kitchen as opposed to the full prep they do currently.
What are our obligations at Summit? Because we have budgeted here $1 million. Where is it?
Summit, it was 1.4.
There it is. And I assume none of this has been done.
That's right. The HVAC upgrade at Harton Hall, it says complete, but it was not actually replaced. What it was is we were able to fix the existing unit, and so it's being identified as complete, meaning the need is no longer there, not that we actually did modernize or upgrade the unit.
And how much of this, if we continue, if we don't reopen right away or at all, but continue to rent it as landlords, what are our obligations? Do we need to do these things?
I mean, that becomes subject to negotiation and conversation, certainly.
Well, I would think we probably would have to do anything that's safety related, right? At least infrastructure wise.
If we were going to be renting it, then right, it'd be part of the conversation with whoever was going to be the user, whether or not we were going to be taking care of some of those issues.
I'm just saying, I don't think almost nobody who's gonna, unless you're doing like a full-blown, almost a transfer, I can't imagine that a user would be in a position to, make seismic retrofitting, for example.
Sure. Agreed.
Well, I'll say that from my perspective, one of the things about Measure J that I think is important is that when the money is spent, that there are some structures that are really new and serve our current needs in the most ideal way, that no pre-existing retrofit can do. especially in the way that we educate now and the proliferation of electronic devices and all that stuff, the stuff that we're trying to do at the library. But to have a completely new structure, albeit at high cost, I look at the delta between, you know, the kind of option A, which it seems to me is the minimal,
Right.
and option C, and you're talking about $1 million out of, you know, $30+ million of Measure J money that was ceded to us by our community to spend wisely. I think, given that pretty much everybody who goes to public school in Ojai makes their way through Matilaha, particularly in the new environment where 6th grade is over there as well, to have a really cutting-edge, beautiful, well-designed, brand-new building that can be used for community events, little concerts, combined with the ability to cook the kinds of meals that we think are important in the district. I'm in favor of the option C.
And where do you see that coming from? Does that mean not doing the solar?
I think solar
or-
is the obvious thing that's going to end up not getting done, it seems to me. But obviously we have to make choices, and again, even if we didn't go option C, we're still having to eliminate some projects because this has ended up being more expensive than we thought it would be on a pretty significant magnitude.
Well, I think if you look at Andy's list, if you don't take away the solar, you have about 800,000.
Which gets us very close to doing the
Option A.
800,000. Once you start peeling back also from that prior page of you know, Topa Topa, that's another 200,000, gets you $1 million. Yeah, once you start pulling from some of the cafeteria budgets as well, I was going to say you're already at the 1.5, that bare bones non-central prep, but you're right, we're actually getting very close already to the 2 before we even touch solar. And that's before we also look at, again, the projects that are slated for this site or any others.
You know, I kind of think the whole idea about the bond was to really build for the future. I mean, as much as possible. I mean, I know it was a Band-Aid bond, and that's, you know, that's that. But if there's an opportunity, because I mean, you look at these other two options, and okay, in one case we have a sale and a really old building. In another case, we have a little bit more seating and a really old building. And frankly, if I had to choose between solar panels at an elementary school and a decent building that's going to last us another 20 years for all the kids that are going to funnel through Matilaha, I think I'd go for the new structure.
Better be more than 20 years.
I was thinking that too.
Don't worry.
40, good, okay.
No, she said don't worry, it should last more than 40.
Don't worry. It better last more than 40 also.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the one you've got there right now has lasted for 70, and honestly,
Yeah,
I'm,
look at
you
the
know,
shape.
it's probably near the end of its life cycle, but, you know, the new one should last 70 or more.
I like option C, but I want to go back to my point from our last meeting, that I really don't think we're acting responsibly until we vote as a board on an overall plan. I don't think we've done it. I think it's irresponsible not to do it, and I don't know why we haven't. I think it's crazy. I think we need to have an overall plan, and I think we need to have component parts that fit into that plan.
Well, you know, to play devil's advocate, if we had voted on an overall plan a year ago, we'd be now greatly amending that plan. I mean, I think...
Oh, I'm all for amending it. I think we'll have to amend it, but I think we need to start from somewhere. Right now, we're just bam, 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 things hit us. I think we need, I don't think it's responsible of a board to spend $35 million just here and there. I think we need to agree to what we're gonna do. And then if we wanna change what we're gonna do, we vote to change it. Isn't that what democracy is about?
To be
I
clear,
agree.
I think that's what we're doing. I mean,
But we
anyone
never
watching
voted
this
on
is
it.
going to be very confused because we've actually identified where we believe the money will be spent, and we're specifically looking at items that we think will have to be on the cutting block.
We never voted for them,
Well, okay.
ever.
Did
So
the
it's the
Citizens
vote?
Oversight Committee? They had a.
This
voice-
has been formally presented to this board, it's been formally presented to COC, to our leadership team, and elsewhere soliciting feedback, but there's not been a body that's actually formally approved. It's been something that's been an iterative process of, here's where we are, and do you see other projects that we need to be amending and that sort of thing.
From my perspective, just in contrast to yours, I think that the way we've done this has been exactly how we should do it, which is that at every given stage, we've said first, what is our first priority? And we've done things like roofs, for example, and then we've looked at each project and we've bid those projects and we've approved those projects, and only through that complete process can you actually ultimately authorize the spending of the money. We've also done it in the backdrop of a broader idea of where the money will be spent, but also recognizing that as time goes along and as we learn new things, I mean, every one of these projects, somebody opens up a wall and says, oh, gee, look, now we've got some new thing. And then we as a board have to pivot and adopt. To take a vote right now on $35 million, I just think is meaningless. And I think the reason we haven't done it is because we have been presented in real time with new and better information as the situation has evolved. And that's how I think it should be done. That's what I think we're doing.
Plus, if I remember correctly, I think what we had identified were what are the things that can we get done right away that are high need, that can be completed during summer, and that kind of thing. So part of what our prioritization was minimizing impact on the schools first. I was a little confused even that the ABCs had changed,
Sorry.
right? So I understand Thane's desire for, I think, a top-down view of where we're going. I don't know that I'm ready to vote on every project, but if there's a way to keep the bigger picture in front of us as opposed to just the little bits and pieces while we're having these conversations, that might be helpful. But yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to vote on a whole list of things because I'm just not sure that that's going to stick.
Except I think I agree with Thane in the fact, like, even just these pages I like, but if there's a way to, see on a page, Nordhoff, Matillaha, with maybe some less details, and to actually make a formal, just even a vote of support. And, we believe these, I know we did talk about some paint at the beginning. It just, everybody's walking up to their classrooms and feeling, ugh, this school's gross. And those things helped, so I think, but I'm gonna agree with Thane on, I don't know if it has to be set in point, but I think it needs to be a goal and it needs to be where we're shooting for, and people need to know that we support that.
At least broad brush. I know how we started, and it was because there were roofs that were falling down and it was raining on people in their classrooms in the library. And clearly those things had to get done no matter what. And we needed to get started and we needed to move forward, and I think we were all in agreement about that. But then I think it's just kind of been a runaway train that I don't feel like we really have I don't feel like we have our arms around 35 million. I think we're making decisions about whether we spend $2 or $3 million without the bigger context.
Then can I just ask,
I'm
clarifying,
supportive of spending the $3 million.
I don't know
by
how
the way.
that's different than
No,
what
I-
we've been doing.
for Jane or Thane, how would that look? Again, I'm trying to understand if it's a procedural issue, and I shouldn't say it's strictly procedural, because obviously substantively, before you vote on this 7-page document that's in your, or 12-page document that's in your materials, you'd likely perhaps give some additional feedback and want to make sure that you see a particular project in or out. But are we talking about substantively to be something different than what you have in front of you, or is it just a matter of that?
And
what-
specifically, you were referring to the Measure J bond plan
Right,
of
that's the-
2017 that we've all looked at and talked about since
But
Measure J was framed.
but every time we had a meeting, we said, okay, we're going to decide what we're gonna do. This isn't the final thing we're gonna decide. And then I don't feel like we ever decided.
So
Is this
to answer,
not that document?
yes, but I
That's
think that's
where
my
I'm
question. I
confused.
mean, my answer would be yes. No, not a new document, this document, but there should be some formal motion.
Okay.
And
I follow that. I just want to make sure is that the same thing you're saying, Dan, as
Yeah,
far
I
as?
mean, I think there have been significant changes since we
if we could
started.
update it,
Since we started, I mean, we decided to do the library, we decided to do a lot of things. I mean.
The library is part of this $35 million plan.
But the costs were a lot different than the original plan, right?
No, they're currently in here as the current $2.85 million budget. That's what we've been sticking to, and that's why I
When,
give them constant feedback on coming in lower on.
what I'm talking about is when we went out with the bond issue and people voted on it, the numbers were vastly different from what
Absolutely.
we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
And I think that if the voters voted on something, if there are changes, we're the body that needs to give some guidance to those changes. I do,
This wasn't part of the voters.
I understand that. What I'm really surprised, that everyone doesn't understand this. It seems really obvious to me that if you were spending $200,000 to fix your house, you would have some idea about what you were gonna spend that money on. I'm gonna spend $20,000 in the kitchen, I'm gonna spend $30,000 in the bathroom, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and it adds up to the 200. And then when somebody comes with a new idea and says, "Wait, let's change this," then you decide you're gonna change it, but you have a plan going into it. I'm just really struck that that many of you don't feel that it's important to have voted on a plan going in. I mean, I know we got started.
You know, I have to make a
I find
record
it
here.
shocking.
Well, okay, so I'm looking at the Measure J bond plan of 2017, which shows total project cost for all campuses of $34,717,669,000, and then shows each school, each campus, and a total expected cost, and then a very detailed list of all the projects that are associated with that. So I've felt like we've been doing precisely what you're advocating we should do. Moreover, like I said, I think the reality is that because you can never really, really know what something's gonna cost until you're really deeply into it, I think it has as much meat on the bones as you could reasonably expect. I do wanna say, I think it's unfair for you to suggest to the world that we've just been, who knows, let's just spend $4 million on it, we don't, it's like,
Well,
because that's
how
what.
I feel.
But
That's really how I feel.
What is this spend that we've been working on? What is this $34,717,669 showing, for example, $12,766,369 for Nordhoff? I mean, isn't that detail?
We never voted on it.
Well, I know, but I guess it was taken for granted that we were all in support of it. Because if we hadn't been, as we were looking at it, we would have said, I don't like the whatever at wherever.
so
We've
Thane,
never
would
had
you
a
be
meeting to
willing
do that.
Would you like to vote on this, if it was updated? Or
I
you want
thought,
something different?
I thought at some point, we were gonna have a conversation about the plan. We had usually what's happened on every other topic that we've ever had here is that when we have a committee, the committee meets, they spend time, they deliberate, they come back with recommendations. We review those recommendations, we either approve them or we don't approve them. With this, which is the biggest thing we've ever done as a board, we've never all gotten together and talked about, we're spending 14 million at one school and 4 million at another school. Did we ever have a conversation and say that's what we ought to do? No.
I feel that it's been an ongoing conversation of increased detail as the details make themselves available. For example, as you know from Balfour Beatty's assessment of our needs, I mean, when Balfour Beatty was still in the picture, and we first started actually looking at the roofing projects, the expense associated with them was much, much higher than had been anticipated. And then there were these various reasons, and we realized, well, we're going to have to, it's like, I think I've always felt like this Measure J has been a triage project, like you talk about with an ER room, where you handle the most immediate needs first. That's why we went into the roofing, for example, immediately. As Jane said, some things like cosmetic things like painting that could be done very quickly. But the truth of the matter is that you can't. I mean, as we're hearing from Greg Grant, the expenses of construction are escalating very quickly. It's a moving target, and so I'm all for it. You and I have just different views about what I think we've been doing collectively, because what I've felt like has been happening collectively is I've been on the Measure J committee, so maybe I have a little different feeling about that, but I also just feel like as this iterative process has gone on, we have gotten as detailed as we reasonably can at any given moment. There's so many moving parts. You've got Summit, as Shelley just brought up. What's going to happen with Summit? Now we don't have school at Summit. That wasn't part of the plan when this was put together. So I'm with, to the extent that this is a question of formality or voting, fine. I'm for that. But I do think it's important to not send the message, because I don't think it's remotely accurate, that staff, like I said, I've been on the Measure J committee. I mean, there has been a lot of work put into how we're going to spend this money responsibly. And in fact, right down to the existence of Greg Grant as a district employee, because we realized that was a much more efficient way to manage this project than it was to continue to spend money on Balfour Beatty. And we've also talked about, trying to do better on the soft costs, which we've been doing. I mean, it's just, I can go on and on and on, because virtually every single board meeting we've had conversations about Measure J, and all of those together to me are the body of work that I think we should be proud of, not be now saying like, gosh, we've never done anything on this subject.
I'm not saying we've never done anything. We've done a lot on it. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been a lot of good work that's gone into it. A lot of great work has gone into it. I just feel like we're the body that's supposed to be overseeing this expenditure of $35 million. And do we know how all $35 million is going to be? With every one of these projects, with the library project, changes significantly what money we can spend on other things. This changes significantly what we can spend on other things.
So can I, for tonight, progress for tonight, can I say that needs to be an agenda on a future, we need to talk about that, whether we vote on something and what, maybe something where Thane and Kevin can be in the agenda prep and it can have a discussion. But tonight, focus back in on this Matilah issue so we can move forward. I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
I'm fine with that. And if nobody else wants to vote on that, if nobody else wants to do it, it's fine. I'm sharing my feeling.
I agree with Jen. I think that it's worth having an agendized discussion. I don't want to spend the time tonight because we have a lot of other stuff, but I'd be curious to know during that discussion what exactly it is that you're seeking, right, in terms of what we would be voting on and what that vote would mean, because I think well, and here I go into the discussion. So yeah, I think it would be valuable to have that conversation.
And I also want to point out, because it has come up, one of the real problems that we have in terms of if one of the things you're talking about is transparency, I think you are, is that my understanding is you don't want to tell the world what you're willing to spend, on something, because you're trying to get competitive bids on it. So, you don't want to say like, oh, I'll spend $1 million to buy a house, because guess what? Someone's going to sell it to you for $1 million. So, that's also, I think, has been part of the issue with this, is that we haven't wanted necessarily to, we've gotten good information about what people thought things were going to cost, but we didn't necessarily, before we identify the specific project and then send it out for bid, we didn't want and I don't think it's considered appropriate to vote on it because it hasn't, we're not voting on the thing yet. It hasn't yet been bid. We don't have a proposed contract, et cetera.
And I totally agree with that concept. I just,
It
Okay.
surprises me that we have had this here for so long, and if you've had questions that they haven't come up before now. Because when I joined the board, this was already an established document. And I remember one of my first meetings asking, so why are we spending so much at Nordhoff and not at Matilaha? And those questions came up, and so I'm not really understanding, and I guess we can move on, but,
I kept thinking it would happen and it just never has. I'm happy to go back to Matilaha. I like option C. This is my third time saying it.
I'd just like to offer up one thing. I believe we called that the MOT priority plan. I think that's what it's called.
Yes, that's accurate.
Just to, not that it matters to anyone other than it was intended to be a document to set priorities. It was done, there are no cost estimates in there, there are only budgets. Meaning that we have a roof, it's this big, typical roofs cost this much per square foot, that's a project. So, will that roof be that price? I can guarantee it probably won't be, but it'll be around that price. And all of the priority, MOT priority document was just a document given to you to help you make your, the priorities out of, which is what we're doing tonight. Andrew's offered up some priorities to be sacrificed, right? So, I'm not arguing against or your point, I'm just trying to set the stage as to what that document was and the intentions of it.
Were you guys part of helping create that document?
We created it. And we created it by doing what I just said. There's roofs over here that we know, I mean, we didn't walk every site, we know there's roofs over here that need to be done. Actually, we and,
Mr. Tyndall?
yes, created it together. Where.
You put the price estimates, made a few updates to the projects. The projects were first identified by Josh Brown, and then the
Correct.
Measure J subcommittee worked together on walking through these 12 pages and fine-tuned it as well. And so really it was a year and a half in the making to where we ultimately last October had a document that actually provided, hey, here's how we can spend 35 million and that's where they were instrumental in helping us get there with Ron.
To allow you to figure out what your priorities are. The projects are kind of different than those numbers. Those are just to kind of put them all equal so you can figure out what's important to you. And then figure out what the designs or the projects need to be, and they will change. It will change, it just will.
What's
Sorry,
the
I didn't
estimate
mean-
on the library project?
2.85, including the quad out front, the exterior improvements.
See, that building is not great, and Matilaha doesn't have a lot of great, they have a great science labs. Gym is very useful. So I'm really torn because, I could see it being a really nice centerpiece. It can be an attractive thing that we could say, like the science buildings were at Nordhoff on the last bond measure. Science and music, those are great buildings. But boy, 3.2 million out of 35 million just really is hard for me to stomach.
But then what would be the next reasonable option, right? Because you go, if we're gonna have a kitchen that's capable of cooking, scratch meals, then what's the least we're gonna spend?
2 million.
2.2, unless you don't want the shade structure.
Yeah, $1 million. That's, a third, what is it? 30%
30%.
higher.
Oh, yeah.
1/35 of the bond
Yeah.
for a brand new building.
Like 10% of the bond. 3 point something out of 35?
I think
I'm
you're
just
talking
saying the
about
delta.
Oh.
The delta between the 226 and the 3.2. This is an action item?
Potential action. So again, what we're seeking is guidance if we have authorization to be able to move forward with option A, B, or C. So I'd like to have a vote that, again, each of those three options assume the central prep, central storage kitchen, and then whether or not we are interested in either of those three options, or at this time only moving forward with the $2 million central prep, central storage, and holding off on any further discussion about dining hall options until we circle back to this bigger topic. But obviously, we're under a timeline for next year's sixth grade moving to Matilahan and trying to get as much of this done as soon as possible, because we do know that it is going to create a down kitchen and down dining hall for a period of the school year. So the sooner this is in the works, the less of an impact it's going to have when we're in that new iteration of the school.
I mean, does it, Tyson, does it do anything for you guys to just know central prep, central kitchen, or I mean, at this point, you really kind of have to know what we're going to do completely, don't you? I mean,
So the project we have today fixes the dining hall structurally and some windows and some finishes. That's the project we have today. And, I'm sorry, and AC. That's the direction we know as of right now. Option A keeps that same path. We just build a structure somewhere else at whatever time you determine B and C are different projects. The mechanical system in that dining
So-
hall is different.
right,
Bigger.
But you guys have been working pretty extensively already on the central prep, central storage concept, and so I think the question is, if the board wanted to hold off, we do actually, because the meeting's so early in September, we have 5 or 6 weeks until our October meeting, 6, I believe. Would you be, if they gave the directive that they are willing to vote on that portion of this, the central prep, central storage, do we lose out in the next 6 weeks because you really can't continue your design elements until we know what's happening if we're going to choose B or C, or is there enough in the kitchen that you guys can keep working on? Right, is that part of the question?
Well,
Is
if
trying to
they're
understand the
gonna,
timing.
if we're gonna tear down the building.
right.
we're
It
gonna
would,
tear down the
exactly,
building.
that's my point. It's like,
Right.
if we're potentially going to tear down the
Right.
building and they're doing a bunch of working on a building that's no longer going to exist, that's a waste of money.
Understood.
I
That's
think we should take a vote. Someone should make, I don't mean this second, but tonight. Somebody needs to make a motion and it needs to be either approved or not approved. Tonight, at some point, when our discussion is.
That's the kind of thing a president would say. But I agree with her completely. I agree. I agree. I'd like to take a vote, and I'd like us to have the whatever discussion we need to have before taking it, but I'd like to have a vote.
Can we vote about having a vote? No, just kidding.
I appreciate seeing the cost of the solar panels as an offset, and I'm willing to forego the panels in order to have this building. I'm looking at that total 4.4 Matilaha tag and this 3.2 for the kitchen, and I'm looking at the items included. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how much more we would be spending at Matilaha. I don't know if anybody can answer that, but if the kitchen is gonna end up costing us 4.2, does that mean we're really gonna spend closer to 6 million at
That's right.
Matilaha?
So the items that we've identified for potential elimination from this plan to free up budget, again, obviously the biggest one is the solar at elementary, so that doesn't touch anything else on here. So it would be a true increase if we went to option C. 3.2 million. We currently have 700,000 in the budget between the kitchen and the dining hall improvements. So it would be an increase of 2.5 million to this number. So Matilaha's overall campus projects would be roughly 6.9 million. But we wouldn't be, we're not, again, we could have that conversation, but we felt, again, the lowest hanging fruit were the projects that we identified. Again, remember solar, we've received information recently from Edison as far as their new rate structure that's making solar far less financially advantageous. We also know that in general, these already were projects that were strained to financially pencil out because they're smaller sites, and so obviously all of the general costs that are incurred with solar installation, still exist. Making that connection to the current, utility is going to exist, whether it's a school serving 1,000 students or school serving 400. So certain economies of scale don't take place at the smaller elementaries. So it was already going to be financially burdensome, and now the fact that electricity is becoming cheaper for us in our school year, to me that is an easy place. But there are other projects we've identified for the budget.
And in looking at Matilaha, the other costly spot that I see is the boys' locker, ADA restrooms and kitchens are the big ticket items.
That's right.
And that would continue to happen. Is that
That's
a
correct.
requirement because we're not at health code and it's not ADA?
That's right. So currently, the Matilaha locker room is part of the Matilaha re-roof, gymnasium re-roof project. Budget on that is just over $500,000. I think we're about 600,000 right now, including the improvement to the locker rooms. The reason that we're doing that is actually this was, again, strategy from Ron, and I'm sure very closely with R&T's guidance of realizing the need for us. We had an outstanding DSA issue. Remember, one of our old issues that were still in the books was at that site. We also knew that with the roofing improvement, we're going to have to be making a certain amount of investment, that 20% of the budget cost in an accessibility improvement. And so we ended up tying those two projects together to meet that need for accessibility improvements for the gym by doing it in the locker room. So we're doing a number of things by having the locker focused,
Okay.
but and also we do have some health code issues as well as far as the moisture that gets in from the showers and that sort of thing.
Okay.
For the audience, the Matilaha Junior High sort of overview from the Measure J bond plan showing a $4.41 million cost was broken into three categories: preservation and restoration of structures, including roof replacements, roof restorations, and building exterior crack repair, patch paint, tennis court restoration, track ribbon gutter drainage repairs. Second category is health, fire, and life and safety, with the kitchen, interior, health department corrections, and subparts, campus asphalt surface with base restoration, asphalt driveway, bus loop, parking lot with striping, safety fencing at bus loop and perimeter, security fencing, boys locker room, shower restoration, ADA restroom upgrade, and then finally category 3, facility upgrade or modernizations, HVAC replacement or installation, window coverings, expand covered dining area, green power.
And this is all online on the website.
Right, that's correct.
And we're looking at,
And what's the status of HVAC at Matilaha?
That was part of the climate tech,
Right.
so that's already
Yeah.
It's done.
no,
complete.
yeah. And we're looking at scratching the
D.
safety fencing.
That's right. So that's another one that's on that packet from last meeting that, remember we, page 17 of 21, that was in addition to solar being another place where budget can be pulled. The green power is still on here. I mean, that also would be a place that we could talk about as far as solar at the secondary sites. We only so far are recommending that we reduce the budget allocated to solar at the elementaries, the secondary sites. While we're still working on whether or not even those pencil out, those at least do have higher utilization, and so the higher your needs are, the more that panel is able to actually offset.
So we were gonna do solar to save money,
That's right.
and it has no other benefit to students.
It could potentially be a shade structure, although again they're permeable, and
You
so
don't need solar for that, right?
What's that?
You don't need solar
That's right.
photovoltaic
That's right.
panels for that.
that's
right?
correct.
So, reason that we were looking at photo panels
Right.
was to potentially reduce our utility
That's right.
costs.
That's
It's not
absolutely
gonna
right.
enhance their education, it's not gonna, do anything like that. But what I'm hearing you say is that rationale is increasingly inapplicable.
That's right.
So I'm with Shelley. I think at the elementary sites, if we're identifying an offset cancellation to fund this increase in expense, and it's something that everybody's acceptable with everybody, losing my voice. I think that's a fair trade-off, and to do it, identifying where we're going to get the money, I think is a responsible way to get there in the absence of a larger context.
Are you willing to make a motion
I will move
I'll second.
to?
that we
I guess I should wait and hear what you move.
I'm ready.
that we approve option C with an accompanying cancellation of photovoltaic cells at the elementary schools.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you. We'll connect
Thanks a
tomorrow,
lot.
but we have our direction. Yeah, you guys are busy.
I just want to follow up, because I texted Catherine, who's our project manager on the library. Our schedule, we are still scheduling to hopefully be done with bidding by November.
Great.
So I misspoke, so we're still on that.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Tyson. Thank you, Tara.
Thank
Great
you,
job.
guys. Appreciate it.
Still come back there at the end.
Absolutely. So this will come back, once it's ready to go to DSA, we'll bring it back to you.
In terms of the overall stuff.
Oh, yes, we'll be working on that, absolutely.
Can I clarify the vote since I was looking down here instead of up by?
It's unanimous.
I thought, okay, thank you. I heard a delayed aye.
That was me.
Okay.
I was torn, so I had to.
Okay, moving on. Good discussion. We don't, democracy is ugly. That was good discussion, really.
Or I am.
So where are we now? Update?
7.5.1.
Update on enrollment figures. Andy.
Yeah, so this is just an item that we started to provide to you formally last year, so it's a continuation of that. What we're looking at across the district is a decline of 60 students from last year. From October of last year. Remember, October is our official census day for the district. So we know this number also is likely to decrease by a few students between now and October as well. But right now, comparing where we were this past Thursday with last October, we're down 60 students. We're at 2383 for enrollment for the district. Last year in October, we were 2443. So that's how we're looking overall as a district. Very proud to share, if you look at the next document in your materials, page 2, we have the fewest combination classes, to my knowledge, that this district's ever had. We obviously, some of the factors for that is the shift of Summit's faculty down to San Antonio, eliminating the combination classes at both those sites. But even at the other sites, you'll see Topa has no combos, Miramani has only one, Myers Oaks does have a few more, although they continue to have the lowest class size average. So once again, for the past 5 years, we've continued to have declining reduced student-staff ratios at the elementary level. I did go back and look. 5 years ago, we were at 31-1 across the district at the elementary level. This year, we're at 26-1. We're a hair below where we were last year. And what I'm especially proud of is that Cheryl and I, talking with our ELT, have really been encouraging and pushing for the lower class sizes at that K-3 level. We know that's what LCFF has prioritized funding for, is having the lower class sizes. We know the importance of literacy at that age and the importance of the foundational elements in order to build in the upper elementary. And so this year we are at 24.4-1 at the K-3. If you move to the secondary.
Can I ask a question about
Sure
this?
thing.
I'm just shocked that at San Antonio, we have 34 students in the 6th grade and 19 in 5th grade.
That's crazy.
Right?
So that goes to say how much teachers prefer their standalone single grade class, because we certainly have talked to both the teachers about that, and the preference has been that rather than either of them have, or
Any
rather than
combo.
having the combination, being able to.
They wanted those standalone. Wow.
Some
Alright.
students do leave for resource as well as for math to go to Matoha, so especially
Right.
in the core content, there's not
It's not
actually
34?
kids sitting in the
Okay.
seats, yeah.
What about at Miramani? I mean, I understand that most of those 4th graders are spending a lot of time in Miss Battleson's class now.
The 32.
38,
Well, there's.
32 in
there's
Ballison,
32
there's
students.
27 in Triggs Cable.
Right, but I think those teachers are doing the same thing. I think they're,
That's right.
I mean, not for the whole day and not for,
Right.
the same way as that TK used to, like for part of the day, you have smaller groups.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, there's certainly, it's the nature of running a district with as many school sites as we have and as low enrollment as we have, is that it does mean that there are just going to be some classes that get wonky. I mean, I really don't like seeing, I mean, the one that I hate the most on this entire page is Icy Colburn at 30 students for TKK. We do have 4 hours of aid supporting her, and so she is getting a lot of additional, time in her classroom. And again, she was involved every step along the way as we were receiving enrollment requests as to whether or not she felt comfortable having the numbers where they were running. But again, there are going to be times where we just have, a larger class than we desire or a smaller class potentially. One of the challenges is, again, we really do believe it's both the legislature and our governor's philosophy, and it's one that I hold to, in prioritizing lower enrollments where we can at the lower grades. But the challenge is if you only have 2 classes per grade, then how do you all of a sudden change your ratio of 24-to-1 at K3 to being something like 28 or 30-to-1 at the upper elementaries? By that, by the nature of running 2 24s, what you might end up having is having to have a 32 and then a combination with 30 in there between the two, the 2 grades to have a 31, and a combo. So unfortunately, that's what ends up happening. We do get spread a little bit, thinner between the sites. And it does mean that you just have some years where you have enrollments in a particular classroom a little higher, and that's why I do think it's valuable to be looking at the overall trend, while of course accounting for the the experience for those kids in those classes.
By the way, have you historically given us this level of detail on the class?
No, it just started last year. Last
It's really
year was the first
great.
year we did.
Thank you for doing it.
Absolutely.
Andy, the 60 that we lost,
Uh-huh.
is there any pattern to where they came from? Is it the lower grades? We're just not seeing the matriculation?
That's right. So, this is, something that we've talked about here extensively over the past year, was how off Delinka Group was in their enrollment projection. Remember, they were anticipating last year's kindergarten being about 218 kids, and this year's was supposed to be 212. You'll see that what I've been saying all along is held true now for another year, that we're really looking like we've settled in as a district that's hovering around 160 student cohorts. So now you see starting in kindergarten going all the way up to 5th grade that we're at those 160 student cohorts. Look at the elementary. We had an outgoing, if you look at this year's 7th grade, 207 students. That means we had roughly 207. I believe we were actually at 209 last year in 6th grade at the elementaries. So when you have a 209 outgoing 6th grade and you only have 160 coming in kindergarten, that's why our elementary has dropped by about 40 students. That right there, it's not, there is a few instances, certainly Summit has an impact as well as far as some of the kids who were in our district who were not retained.
What was that, about 10 kids?
Yeah. But for the most part, what we were looking at is really a matter of having, larger outgoing classes than incoming.
On that Summit number, at one point we had heard 24 and then we heard 19. What was the real number of what we lost? I mean, because I know only 8 stayed, so.
10 stayed. So the real number that we lost was 14. Well, even that low is 6 of those students had not committed to returning, and they lived far outside of the district.
So they said even at Summit, that was the numbers when they saw that there was no cohort, say for their students, they probably would not have come. So that was before the decision even to close Summit.
Is that
That's
the
right.
family that was here? That, I thought there was a family here also of 6 kids or 4 kids that were moving away from Summit.
That's a separate family. You're right. That family moved to Idaho. And again, that was
So we
a
would've lost
decision
that.
completely independent.
Boysen,
Exactly.
the Boysen family, right? Boysen? Sorry. They spoke to us. They said it publicly, I thought. So.
I have a couple questions on Matilaha.
Yeah, that's where I was moving to. So, a few things. A few introductory comments, and Jane, I'm happy to take your questions. These numbers, I actually also happen to be proud of, just as I am with the elementary. If you look at Matilaha and Nordhoff, if you pull out non-academic courses, and you pull out at the high school level the AP test or AP classes, because when we have a singleton, we have a single AP, U.S. history. If we have 42 kids who are wanting to enroll in that class, our general approach has been let's open the door to them and help give them the opportunity. And so that does mean that often our APs run slightly higher. So you pull out the APs and you pull out non-academic courses. And this too is actually the best numbers you see as far as the fewest number of classes that have 40 kids or more in there. So our class size average is right in line with where we've been, but again, to me, and I believe Cheryl as well, we're comfortable actually running classes at 34, 35. What we get really concerned with is when we start seeing classes that, we have one that's 28, one that's 42. If you average it out, it looks like we're running averages of 35. Well, that's a very different story than actually, reducing the variance between class size and seeing something that hovers closer to that, the mean and the median being closer to one another.
So my question was, why is Carson Brown teaching 4 and Brenda Ferrence 6 instead of 5 and 5 on the science? He's teaching 4 sections.
Brenda's only doing 5.
Yeah, it's 5.
I think because these are periods that's being listed, so you don't see that her third period is actually her prep.
Oh, I looked at the bottom number.
Yeah,
I looked at the
exactly. That's
sixth,
her.
I
That's
thought
her
she
sixth
teaches-
period. So
yeah.
she's only teaching 5.
Oh, okay. And he's teaching 4.
That's right.
And then there's no advanced 8th grade math?
Do you remember that, Cheryl? Was that something that was? Is that an error in our
I don't recall
report?
that being a discussion anywhere. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, I would have assumed that they were offering
What is
it.
it?
Oh, she's.
Nordhoff now.
Who taught it last year?
I think Perkins, usually.
Oh, I thought you were mentioning somebody at Nordhoff.
I'll check
I
that.
would assume
It's
would've been
possible. It's very possible that the way this report generated from our system that it wasn't showing the classes that should have been identified. So that'll be something I follow up with you guys by email on Friday.
It does it show 7th grade?
Yeah.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe there is one though.
Yeah, I'll get that.
There was no discussion of canceling it.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
I certainly am not.
And I know
Assuming that
some of
it's
the kids
exist.
who are in it, so, I believe it is.
Accelerated. Nordhoff. Yuck.
I have questions about Nordhoff.
Sure.
You have- Did you want to say something about it?
My commentary held true for Nordhoff as Matillahaw. That again, we I believe at Nordhoff are running. Well, I'm certain we're running the fewest number since I've been here of classes over 40. When you look at the non-academic or non-AP, certainly some of these classes are running a little bit higher if we're looking at on an average basis. But again, one of the areas that we prioritized was really trying to limit the number of classes that went over that 35 threshold.
Well, and I'm looking at some that are running really low, the 17 for ROP video.
Yeah, so
There's
certainly
those
you'll see that in some of our CTE classes that we do run some of those electives, run a bit lower as we're trying to, Jake's a second year teacher, trying to build up the program. We do receive a lot of funding from VCOE to support these programs, and so there are some intentional efforts made here with those CTE pathway electives to build up the program while we have the funding.
My big question though is French.
Yeah.
The numbers are not great in French, and I have a hard time with the fact that we offer only 2 years when really you need 3 years of a language to get into a UC or Cal State, but we don't offer that third
So
year.
if we have the numbers, we will be.
But you won't have the numbers if you don't have them. I'm gonna be Mary Ann Ratcliffe right now and say if you have it, then more kids will take French.
Well, remember, we only had French 1 last year. This is the first year we're doing French 2 because we don't have students who can take French 3 without having French 1 and 2 in their back
I thought this was
pocket.
our third year. No?
No, I believe that this is I'm certain this is our second year.
This is,
We only ran French 1s last year.
okay.
I don't
stand
even see
corrected.
French.
Lisa Porto teaches French.
Second page
On
of
the
your-
second
Oh,
page.
second
Right, Cheryl?
Sorry.
French
I
2
thought-
was what was added this year, and then
I thought we had French 2 last year.
you could be correct, Shelley. I know that we've certainly have had conversations about if we don't see an uptick in numbers, we are going to have a conversation come out to this board in the spring as to whether or not we're able to maintain the second foreign language offering.
We
Well,
absolutely have concerns about maintaining it.
And I do notice that there's 27 in French 1 and 18. I don't know what it looked like last year in French 1. Are we losing kids? Are we maintaining kids in the French class?
I don't recall how many were in
The program
French 1.
built the program increased this year relative to last year's enrollment.
Okay.
I'm not sure how many kids we lost, but I do know that the numbers are improved for this year.
Okay, and my feeling as a parent is it would be really hard to commit my kid to French if there wasn't a 3-year option. Because you're limiting their ability to get into the schools that they would be trying for.
No, as far as
That-
A to G, there's no requirement for a third year.
No, but it's not required, but it is recommended.
Is it?
It is recommended. 3 years are recommended by UCs. And so people are looking at that. If you have Spanish and French, and you know you can take 4 years and an AP in Spanish, but you really can't even meet the recommended requirement, or recommended, suggested, can't use the word requirement. It would be hard to enroll in that.
I will get more information on French 2 and the possibility of a French 3.
Thank you.
What about these, there's a lot of math, 41, 46, 38 history, 38 math, and there's another history at 40.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked at what would happen if we hired one more teacher at Nordoff?
Well, again, the challenge is that we'd have to have a teacher who had multiple credentials, because when you look at running 2 40s like we are in Math 4, adding another math teacher is not actually appropriate. It's just a matter of, do we want to run 3 classes at 27 versus 2 at 40, and how do we get the extra section? So it might be a matter of adding a section to a current faculty member, but the hiring gets challenging. As far as for this year, I do not believe that Dave would believe that there's a way in the master schedule to be adding sections to break out some of these larger classes.
Because our math, smarter balance or whatever it's called, dashboard is not good. And we're doing a harder math and we're putting more people in. It seems to me like there's your problem, is too many kids in math class. As a teacher, how can you, 1, differentiate, and 2, figure out which kids are having a hard time when you've got that many?
So as we're looking at math, forgive me if I'm misremembering, but I think that the 2 real big ones that stand out were for math 12, and again, there's only 2 sections being run, so we had to make a choice of, do we run 3 classes at 26 or so kids, 27, or do we run the 2 larger? But let me take a quick look to see about other.
Sean Jackson's got 2.
For Math 4, you mean?
Huge.
They are Math 4.
So yeah, so
they're not
math, that's the
required.
Math 4 one that I was mentioning as
Yeah.
far as the bigger numbers. I don't recall seeing other math classes.
How many, we require, how many years of math?
3.
3.
And college, A to G only requires 3 as well. So by the time you get to students take, I do think we prioritize lower numbers in Math 1 and Math 2. And then when it gets to these, there's not as many students choosing to take Math 4. And it comes down to those students being more dedicated, more motivated because they're choosing to do it. So it becomes sort of a slightly different clientele that you're working with at that point.
More analogous to an AP.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And then what about band? Does he really have 61 kids in one? They fit there?
I believe that's his 7th period, right? Where do we start?
Third.
No,
Third.
third period.
Oh, it is actually his 3rd, yeah. We are running some strong numbers.
You're supposed to look at that and go, we have a really great band program.
We do
We
have
have
a
a
great
lot of kids in band. Or winds.
Right, and going back to Matilaha, looking at Thomas Fredrickson and Bill Wagner's classes there, I believe that we're approaching something around 160 out of a 380 student school are in a music class. That's really exceptional. And that's with our elimination of that his wheel class to support the 6th grade this year. So certainly the music program that Thomas Frederickson's building up at Matilaha is helping feed into Bill's always exceptional program.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, this is just an information item just for transparency to the public as well as for your information, something that we started last year.
Okay, board self-evaluation, reflection, and goal setting.
Skipping summit because there's no update. 7.5.2.
Sorry about that. I had it open to this page. 7.5.2, what is that? Summit. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, we did, you were gonna talk about that a little.
Well, this is just a standing agenda item we have each month, and so if there are things relevant to update you on, or for the public to engage in the topic, we will. This month, there is very little. We did just meet 3 weeks ago. I will say that we've been working closely with the rec department to try to offer some classes up there. And so Condor Kids, the rec department, Ojai, Upper Ojai Council, all are also looking at, facility rentals up there. And then the other thing is I did send out to you earlier today, I received an email from Marianne Ratcliffe that was an article from San Paulo about their enrollment numbers. She requested that be forwarded along to you, so we did that earlier.
Showing that, I guess, that there's pretty robust.
Was that an edited article? Or was that the article from the paper?
That was what was forwarded to me from her.
I think it, like Andy was saying, it's sort of like what the Ojai Valley News does, sometimes publishes things earlier on the internet.
Okay.
What-
It just seemed like stream of thought consciousness rather than a story.
But it was interesting information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So moving on to the board. And then bring up the mirror.
So you're looking for us to bring forth ideas or goals that
So Jane and I were the board members at Agenda Prep, and I think particularly driven by Jane, the idea was that we would, rather than, speak in gross generalities, try to be more specific about things that we want to bring forward as goals, I think in particular. So that, that we can actually assess whether we've met those goals and goals that are, specific enough to be, where there is some real sense of how you might achieve it and what achieving the goal would be. Jane, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, I do, so, I think when we were, I don't know if it was the last meeting, or maybe it was that meeting where we were talking about goal setting, and, Kevin, you had mentioned you hadn't decided yet about whether you would run for reelection. And one of the things that we talked about was the sort of sometimes lack of feeling here that we have impact, that there's so much that the state requires that you're doing this and that how much impact or influence do we have on actually helping improve our schools. And so I think we kind of came to that place of, what if we were to give Cheryl and Andy and our sites sort of, these are, this mission statement is so general. So how can we meet the mission statement or the vision with specifics? So that's where that came from.
So did you have specific things you'd like to bring forward?
I do. These are just my ideas, so I'm not saying anything, I hope you guys have ideas, and you know what, you can have one, and maybe.
You need an overhead projector.
I didn't go that far, but. So my, you know, and I don't have a priority on these necessarily, but, so primary grade literacy is one of the things I've been talking about, trying to improve grade level reading so that by the time kids enter third grade, they're all reading at third grade level. And I think it's a priority, like, I don't care if everything else is thrown in the trash can, really. I mean, I just feel like if you're not reading, you're not gonna be able to learn at third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. So we just need to focus our energy and our resources and our money on literacy.
And if you can read, you can learn anything you want.
Right. And then the second one was primary grades focus on learning through play. I do feel like the teachers who've been around for, 28 years, they talk about the changes, and everybody talks about it. You can read articles galore, I'm sure Cheryl, about how we've become more academic, we're making the kids sit down more, we're making them write 3-sentence journals, in kindergarten. Right, when I was in kindergarten, I was learning the alphabet and how to count to 10.
I counted to 25.
You're that much younger than me. But, so it's just, and what else did we do? We built with blocks, we painted, we did finger painting, we did water buckets, we did play, but we were learning things. I went into first grade, I went to college, I got a degree. I can use my computer and my smartphone and,
Play.
so I just think, so I just wrote a few supporting things for learning through play rather than sitting and doing too much at a table. Monica Ross, Kathy knows that. She ran an incredible learning. Did you ever sit down
When
and
you were
have them?
playing with water, you were learning conservation.
Just shapes, playing with leaves, you're learning a lot. It doesn't have to be sitting at a table doing a worksheet. I'll just read the one quote that I like there. Education is not filling a pail, but igniting a fire. It's like, yeah, that's what I think if we're doing too much sitting at young ages, we're kind of smashing their creative interests in learning. And then the last one was improve our outreach to boost enrollment. We've talked about this a ton. I found a website that I have no idea, I'm not a marketing person, I don't know how much it would help, but I am just been inundated this summer with people who have moved to Ojai and who are going to private schools with young kids. And I think we've got to do a better job.
What's your sense of why?
I think a lot of it is just they're people with money, and that's people with money tend to go to private schools. But I think, there's some things that, the sort of, even the rock tree sky, the Oak Grove, that sense of being in touch with nature, that's a big trend in our society now, and I think we have some of that. That's what Summit talks about it, what San Antonio talks about it, what Miners Oaks talks about. So how do we let people know we've got that too? Do you know that the Miners Oaks kids walk, to a farm? Do you know that they go out into the meadow, and, the kids at Summit, did you know they would go out into the orchard? And so we got to do a better job at finding out what they're looking for and finding out, do we provide that? And if we do, how do we let them know? And if we don't, why don't we? And what changes can we make? I think if we do a focus, say, on boosting enrollment through outreach, we'll learn things, and then maybe those things become goals. Maybe not.
I think going to the question about why, if we have a lot of people moving from LA, we moved from LA 20 plus years ago, and where we lived, very expensive part of town, but the public schools we just didn't feel they were a viable option. There was just such a gap between them and private schools. And when we moved here, we felt that public schools were viable. And I think if you're coming from a place where public schools aren't viable in your mind, and nothing changes your mind, then you just don't do it. But
So do we reach out to realtors to?
I think that's part of it, but this thing has 5 steps, I don't know, but part of it is marketing and finding out, it is probably some sort of a small group that says, okay, who are we? What are we trying to get out there that we do. You know, it takes a little bit of work. It's not just, oh, our website needs to be better. It's a little more work than that. And do we put money towards that? Is it important enough a goal that we say, okay, Andy, we think this goal is critical and that's gonna cost some money?
This does sort of echo some previous conversations I recall us having about each of the schools having their own uniqueness and their own specific things to offer that we don't really highlight very well. And so it does make some sense to me.
Happy.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna be very limited in my interruption or in my engagement in this because I know this is your topic, but I do just want to let you guys know. Right now, we're actually in the process. Tiara Taylor, one of her assignments she's currently working on, is exactly what we're talking about as far as that brochure. She's already met with our leadership team and asking each principal for a few sentences of what makes their school unique or what they want to highlight when it comes to realtors. We're going to have that brochure done by the end of this month. And in early October, I'm meeting with the realtors to make sure that they have a sufficient number. So we are working on some of those things. I know that you're talking about more than just that, but just since that conversation's come up,
No,
it's
that's great.
one thing
It's a
to
beginning.
share. Exactly, it's a beginning. Yep.
If we only did one thing, I really like the idea of this reading. That every child that is not physically or mentally incapable of reading, if we could pull out all the stops and get them up to speed, I'd be willing to sacrifice other things for that.
I did find this one school district, it's the last thing I did, they had a sort of a literacy panel or something, and so I was thinking Ojai, literacy volunteers of Ojai. Like people who are, I have friends whose kids are off in college who, volunteer and go read in the classroom, but what if it was like organized and there was a real, like OEF, or maybe it's OEF helps, gather a group.
Isn't there Inspire that's
Yeah.
doing that?
Inspire's focused more on single activities to try to engage the community. Their whole goal is to get 500 community members to volunteer for 1 hour. OEF actually currently is doing this initiative at the elementary level for readers, and they're actually paying for anyone to get fingerprinted and TB tested to be able to do it. So OEF's focusing on more of the longer term volunteers, and Inspire's doing the short term.
Along the lines of the learning through play, I stumbled today, I think through NPR, across a program called Let Grow. Have you
was
heard of
NPR, yeah, I saw it yesterday.
Did you? And I thought, I'm very intrigued by that.
Oh, I could absolutely do that.
Yeah, I just perused their site a little bit, but,
Was this the free range kind of?
Uh-huh.
About the woman who let her son play in the backyard and
Yep.
hack a trail to his friend's house and all that?
yeah. But what I liked about it, we've kind of had this discussion in the district about homework at the elementary level and how that's not necessarily the greatest thing, but one of the homework pieces that they did that I thought was just brilliant was once a week, your homework assignment is go do something that you've never done before, that you didn't know you could do, and try it and see what happens. And it could be, walking to the library if that's appropriate, or helping to cook dinner, or making your bed by yourself, or whatever it is. Just do something yourself that you've never been able to do before, so that you gain that self-esteem in trying and failing and trying again and succeeding. And the other piece about it that kind of gives me heart palpitations, but I think is wonderful, is opening up the school playgrounds to after-school play without adult supervision. And kids just go out and play. And they're piloting this in New York and about 5 different elementary school campuses in New York. And you can,
Yeah, I understand.
but kids being able to play without supervision and being able to figure out those dynamics themselves, there's a lot to be said for that. So that was one of the, came to mind. That I don't know, I just was looking at the site today.
I like all of that stuff, I just don't know how we measure it.
That's true.
Where the reading part, I think we can measure it.
And one of
think
the
it's
things that I read, though, was that they saw a direct difference in the classroom. That kids were able to control themselves a bit better in the classroom because they had learned their skills out on the playground. But how do you measure that? Angie's laughing at us going, yeah, right.
No, I was laughing because I was thinking about they learned self-control because somebody out there said,
Somebody.
"You do that again and I'm gonna hit you," right?
There were natural
Like some friend
consequences.
that they were playing with, because they had to take the risk. And didn't we all learn that when we were playing in the street? We weren't supposed to.
Teachers can't teach that lesson so well.
There's no way we could do that. We have to talk gently.
Yes. So, anyway. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was our job in reaching out to other organizations in town. And I know I've brought this up before, but I've been thinking about it a lot in this early literacy even. We know that we don't live in a bubble and kids come into our schools, you know, at 5 years old, and it's not like they came in from a vacuum. And I feel like we have the ability as a district, not financially, but perhaps to amplify the voice of some of these other groups like the Nan Tolbert Center that help with those early years, or the library and their toddler programs. And even if it's just, you know, I believe that we have this isn't Nan, Kevin, working on some kind of a
Yes.
volunteer?
Different Nan.
Different Nan. Nan
Davis.
Davis.
Yeah. I guess Davis. Tori Nichols.
Working on creating a way for people to volunteer, and
I believe she's working with OEF now.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring
yeah,
to.
and if we were able to say, you know, there's these other, it's not just in the district that would benefit the district. I think that looking at these other organizations, and I think we also should be reaching out to Rotary on a regular basis. And I'm also thinking that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a once a year report to the city and let them know the state of the schools and what's going on. I know that the library sends their head librarian to the city to let them know what's going on.
Well, in the flush of that election back in 2014, we had a city council person assigned to our meetings.
Oh,
That wasn't
I missed
awesome.
that.
Petered out.
But that's, you know, that's relying on them to do it. I think if we want that to happen, then we go and say, send a board member or somebody to, here's what's going on, and let them know where we need help and what things are going well, and where, I think that creating those collaborations in the valley are important to the district.
I agree with that. I have to say, I think that, kind of echoing what Jane said, I would like to, as a board member, focus on some, I mean, everything we've said is legit and we should continue, I mean, and I agree with the outreach aspect and everything. But I would love to do some particular form of outreach that's different than what we've done, but that is specific, and maybe literacy is the best subject, because that also can be measured. You know, you could actually have a real impact. How do we measure? We don't obviously begin STAR testing until 3rd grade, right?
We have a diagnostic test starting in TK. We use ESGI, a program, and so we can track how many skills they have, and by the time they're actually readers, through our accelerated reader program, we can actually get an equivalent reading level, so we can determine, like, you know, the child's 2.3, which means 2nd grade, 3rd month of school. So we could certainly track the skills they're gaining, and then once they're actually readers, their actual reading level.
I wonder, you know, obviously it's weighing into a gigantic subject, but if there are areas where our teachers have identified need, you know, where we could intervene early as a district. Again, I know you guys are already on this stuff.
We're doing a
but,
lot.
Yeah, I know.
But
I mean,
could there be more?
You know,
Yeah.
But I think with from at least from my perspective as a board member, I would love you know, I think a particular program with the idea of actually measuring results would be something I'd be really interested in doing. Not solely on a, you know, as, you know, kid by kid, but as a something that because I think it also plays into the PR part of this, the idea of people moving to our district and saying, what does your district have to offer that's different? And I think it's easy when we're up here as board members to sort of generically speak about obvious things that everyone, you know, this stuff. But if we can do some innovative things that we can then also publicize, that are not only helpful, but also something we can point to that we're doing that's different than some other districts. I think that would be very helpful for our district.
I agree. I'm all for a literacy goal. It's in our LCAP already. We could just shine a spotlight on it and work on it even more so. The hardest part with, you know, a program that we do that is the key thing is that that's never going to be the key thing because we use multiple programs and multiple strategies and not one thing works for one kid. So you have sort of a tiered approach. Like your core curriculum should work for 75 to 80% of the kids. And then when that doesn't work, when they're not meeting the skills, then you have to have these sort of tiered options. What do you do for the kids who aren't meeting the goals? Well, they go work in small groups. That's where you get into maybe specialized programs that you purchase or more adults, right? That's the key thing. I think that helps kids. But then if that doesn't work over, let's say, the next year, then maybe they get one-on-one tutoring in that third year out, right? And then part of it is it has to sort of be, if you're looking at early literacy, I've always said I would wish that you've heard me say this at TOPA lots of times, I wish that every kid was reading at the third grade level by the time they leave second grade and enter third, because third is sort of that year where you're no longer learning to read, you're reading to learn, right? And that's what you were saying. If you're not reading, you're really going to have struggle in your learning. So, you know, if that's your goal, then over a course of years, TK, K, first, second, we have to have a tiered system of approaches to meet those needs so that we can catch all the kids. Some kids are just going to get there in the core program because what we're doing is great and it works for most kids. But it's those strugglers that we have to have little catch points to help them, and that's going to be different depending on the different needs. So, you know, looking at that more closely, trying to identify ways to do that better, I'm all for that. I think we'd all be all for that, for sure. Bringing in more community support to do that. I mean, when it gets down to a child who's really struggling, I mean, one-on-one help from an adult is a key factor, and that becomes something that, you know, human resource is hard to get, so.
I think for me, that was really, because I do feel like, you know, I don't know, you have a cousin and he did Hooked on Phonics and your kids did something else and they're all reading, so different programs work. But obviously when we look at our third grade students, we have students who aren't reading or who are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, I also recognize, you know, early reading, if somebody had read to them when they were 2 and 3, by the time they come to us, it's too late. You know, so how do we, you know, is there something we can do at the TKK level in terms of extra people reading, and then we reach out, we decide we need to do a pre-K, or what do you call it, preschool, you know, though that's full, isn't it, our place to grow? I mean, you don't have room for more kids, you'd have to open another room or something, or maybe we have a preschool reading room or something, you know, because we found like the only way to get these kids is to start them earlier, or, I don't know, I just know that there are some kids, I mean, I feel like the dashboard is showing we're only 34% of our third graders are. are successful. at
Well, that
the-
doesn't mean they could be reading on grade level, but not doing as well on the SBAC, because the SBAC has a whole lot of skills that are beyond just simply reading skills.
Okay.
So, but like I said, AR is probably a better, just simple diagnostic tool of their reading level, and we could look at that information, and use that as a gauge of our success throughout whatever we choose to do.
I find that with my experiences in volunteering in the classrooms and doing that one-on-one reading with kids for so many years, that I kept coming across, it doesn't matter how much I read with them, they can't stay awake because they haven't had breakfast and they haven't gotten sleep the night before. And I can remember times where I'm like, okay, we're gonna stand up and read now because you're falling asleep. So there's more to literacy than just literacy, in my mind. Do you have a gauge on?
Well, that's where
That's my anecdotal.
If you think about SST, student study team, that's exactly the kind of problems we try to solve. So like I said, you try to meet, 80% of the kids' needs in just your core program. And then when kids are not making the gains, then you do, like I'm saying, like small group instruction or this or that. But what you're doing as you're funneling out, as kids are starting to make the mark and you're getting to that 5% who you're still not getting to, for example, then you're just literally problem solving per kid. That's what SST is. We'll sit down with what is going on with this child. Maybe it's they're not getting breakfast every morning. Can we get this child breakfast every morning? Is there a way to get this? So, you problem solve as you see who's not making the gains, you problem solve for those kids. But that's why I'm saying it's not one program. There's not one program you're going to purchase. It's multiple factors that you have to look at to meet the child's needs. And in some cases, you're right, it's not simply just reading instruction. It's maybe breakfast in the morning, so.
Well, I live across the street from the baseball field, and I'll tell you, there are kindergartners who are out there at 10 o'clock when their parents are playing softball. So.
That's a
We could go
variable.
read to them.
Start a reading program.
We could bring out some tents.
We found the outreach.
But I think that is one of the concerns too,
Problem
is that if you don't, it becomes overwhelming, so you don't start. How do we start and have some impact and get us to a place where we can take another step or?
We have a good start. We're doing a lot of things right now. The question is, what else can we do? Because when you look at our scores, we certainly have kids who are still not reading at grade level, right? So what else can we do?
So I think we certainly have talked about literacy. You have complete support by administration on this being a topic worthy of further exploration and discussion. Cheryl was feeling very left out this morning when I was talking to her about the board agenda and how she really didn't have a role tonight. So we will assign her a nice, robust one for October to give a report to let you guys know what we're currently doing, and as time permits, for her to make some initial thoughts as to, okay, if this is going to become the priority that this board really focuses on, what does the next level of either financial resources or other attention being paid to this? Maybe it's not financial, it's just a matter of we're going to cut some other priority that we currently have at first grade to free up more time for these things. So that can be something that is around the topic of literacy. We'll come back with more information so that way you guys know, again, what we're currently doing and what the list of options that we see as being the path forward if this board wants to adopt that as its, official or unofficial, priority.
I personally, thank you, Jane, for presenting these. I would be happy to make K3 literacy kind of a theme of this year for the board. And again, hopefully no one's out there. We got a kindergarten teacher. The idea is that we can become more engaged in this subject in our position and help drive some, we're here to support. The idea is not you're not already doing everything you can think of. The idea is that we as a board jump on this idea and see what we can help
Support.
Yeah.
And what would you want to do if you had more resources?
And maybe this becomes a yearly thing, a yearly focus. But wouldn't it be nice to think that we collectively maybe find some ways to add some resources, as Jane was saying, or take some from somewhere else and see results? That would be great.
And maybe engagement
Mhm.
from others,
Mm-hmm.
which has always been a concern. or outreach to, our Hispanic community, which we want to do. I mean, it kind of becomes a seed for a lot of things, perhaps.
Yes.
Great.
Were there any other?
You know, mine
ideas?
was all real administratory. Because the first thing that I wrote down was this property. I'd like to see at least one major step down the road this year. And I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it would be lovely if it was looking at proposals and even potentially making a decision. I'd like to see that happen. So for me, that was something that it was just, we put a lot of time and energy into it, and I want to see it keep going, because I know there's a lot of influences to slow it down.
And what's the timeline, do you think? Like October now, they're saying?
We were thinking
At
we
the
were going to be in
state?
September, and they told us last month it was going to be November.
November.
Because they skip each month. Their board meetings are every other month.
That's
Which, if you guys want to consider, we could also.
That'd be easy.
Yeah, I had actually been talking about Jane, and I had just one of the things I think that's frustrating about education, and particularly I think public education, is just that it is, you can only do so much, within the hours that are allocated to you as a school district and as a teacher and as a school. You have these kids for this limited amount of time, and candidly, everything else that's going on in their lives, just like you're saying, whether you're at a softball game at 10 o'clock, whether you're hungry, all that stuff is frankly overwhelms the other, and as a aspiring educator, I guess I feel like if I start to have more drastic ideas, wondering if we as a school district should consider more forcing ourselves almost into the lives of people in some way, or not necessarily simply neutrally waiting for people to come to us. It's always disappointing to see frankly sometimes the engagement even at back to school night, where you wonder, should I come to you? Should I go out to you? Jane sent me an article about a school district where the superintendent was dealing with a high, I don't know if she sent it to you as well, a high percentage of refugees and stuff, and just a lot of turmoil in the district with people showing up who basically didn't speak English, and they really jumped on it and engaged into the lives of people, offering more services, including adult services and classes and accessing materials to help your kids. And I know many of this stuff has been tried, and even in our district we've done some stuff, but it's still where I am. So it's where my mind is to think that the children of people who are sitting here or out there, they're going to be pretty good because their parents are caring and they're obviously engaged, and they're going to find resources, and they're going to be okay. But there's the kids that are really going to struggle seem inevitably to be in that position, and I'd love to think that there's something we could do to do better. So, with that, superintendent's report.
No. We still have a whole.
Oh no, my CSBA sample.
Right.
Yeah.
So, do you guys mind having this on the agenda again next meeting, just to see how we take this forward? That sounds good, right? So now we're at the CSBA, all about lunch.
And I actually have mine in my office. Do you guys mind if I take a 2-minute run over there? If you guys want. Well,
I
no,
saw
it's-
Andy.
yeah, that's fine.
No, go ahead.
Actually, I have to say 90% of it is, okay, you gotta do this, Andy. Okay, you gotta do this, Andy. Okay.
Yeah.
you gotta do
Why don't you
this.
address it?
Yeah. do a brief restroom break. Turn on the AC maybe because I'm burning up. Am I the only one that's really hot? It's hot. Is it hot, right?
Oh, no, you can step in. I was holding my tongue.
I know, I see.
I think that you should focus on community with a secondary focus of lifting up literacy. Because if you engage the community, you would have this whole team of people to help improve the literacy. And you're not just laying it on the feet of the teachers who are already trying to do that in the first place. And we've already talked about this a lot, about how partnerships with community members, Kevin was talking about helping refugees or helping new people. I think if you focus on community, then that sense of community is going to draw people into the schools, because that's what private school parents are looking for.
Yeah.
They want a small school where they feel like somebody pays attention. So if, as a board, you focus on community and say, this is what we're focusing on with the ultimate goal of improving literacy, I think you have a powerful thing there. How do you create community at each school site? How do you create community within the board? How do you create community with the district? To me, I think creating that community creates partnerships, and those partnerships of the community and the parents then doubles the number of people supporting and working to help children be educated. Just like we've talked about that web.
Yep. I was talking with somebody else from Nordhoff recently about new parents, especially non-English speaking parents, and how difficult that can be. And if you had a mentor parent that you were teamed up with, you know, kind of like when the kindergartner starts school in the middle of the year, and here's your buddy, and they're going to take you around the playground, something along those lines to let them know how.
Well, that's what we're doing with kindergarten potlucks.
Yeah.
And the parents were so excited because they were like,
Do you still do those?
I'm doing them this year.
Are you?
Yeah. But they're like, I don't know anybody. This is awesome. I can meet parents. So that I think.
That's great.
Those were always wonderful. Yeah. And I know somebody in your class. Do I have another relative in there? Somebody.
So,
Sorry about that.
I have something on page 9. Does anybody have anything before that?
I just have a general question, comment on the federal grant fund section. How relevant really is that to us? Do we spend a large amounts of money on federal?
No.
Right, I didn't think so, I just.
Right. 9?
Oh, okay, so this, on page 9, that's kind of what we were talking about. Maybe you're already doing it, and maybe what Tiarza is doing is, the superintendent shall designate an employee at the district office or school site to develop, implement, and coordinate an IPM strategy that incorporates effective,
That's
sorry,
for the
pest
pest
management.
management.
Yeah, anyway, okay, so take note.
We are doing all of that. Russ Bennett is our IPM manager, and in fact, our staff development or the staff training on the Tuesday prior to start of school, all of our classified employees were in receiving their IPM training.
I just want to briefly comment on this because when we were living in Bangladesh, and I don't want to dump poison on kids, I want to make that clear, but every other country besides the United States of America, when mosquitoes carrying dengue fever were coming in, everybody else sprayed and killed the mosquitoes. And the Americans said, we don't want to spray pesticides. And several Americans almost died. They were airlifted to other countries because.
We hadn't built up the
And I
resistance.
got dengue. Yet there's no resistance to it. And so I don't know what threats we have, But I don't want us to not address a threat because, I mean, it's like anti-vaxxers. I don't want to not vaccinate our kids because of something that's not real. I think we need to address issues when they come up. Anyway,
That's a different topic that I'll argue you with, but.
Right.
So I assume that that also means that you're turning in the reports that it's.
Absolutely.
required.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, again, as you guys know, so much of these board policies are based on legal changes. And we get notice as soon as a legal change takes place, and so we become compliant with the law perhaps months before CSBA actually makes a recommendation on, new board policy language.
From page 20, it's also another, I guess, law that our food service needs to, the bottom, the last one, needs to accept a bid or price for agricultural products grown in California before. I assume most of our stuff is grown in California.
Yeah, 70% is within 150 miles. So we certainly try to source as locally as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a situation where you wouldn't do this, because it says
Right.
you have to,
As long as
you
it's
have to
like-
buy it as long as it's as cheap as any other place that would be much further away, so I wouldn't.
Page 55. The second paragraph, again, retaining, it says new, so I think, like you're saying, you already know this, that you have to retain the records for 2 years. And then page 56, the last paragraph, so we have a poster, a DFEA poster.
Oh, I wondered about that too, with transgender rights.
So this one I'll have to check. We do get our posters from a company that stays current on all these things. And as soon as there's things that require updating, then they send out blankets. So I'm sure it is, but frankly I don't know specifically if it does have all of this.
Where do these things go that need to be posted? I mean, you do them at each school site?
Yeah, typically
break
in a
room?
break room or somewhere like that, where it's one of those posters I'm sure you've seen
Yeah.
everywhere, where it's a big, like this has the wage, minimum wage, it has the different notice
Really small
requirements. Yeah,
writing, so you can't
exactly.
read it anyway, so.
Sure.
This is the service, 95, page 495.
I had nothing.
There's two options at the bottom, option 1, and then on page 96 is option 2.
Completely
So
uninterested.
I was just wondering if you knew anything about why he crossed out option 1.
Because our policy, which is also collectively bargained, is option 2.
Now, which, say again?
On 96,
Oh, 96.
95 and 96.
John
So
knows
what-
our policies enough to know that we'd.
He meets with me and will ask. So he and I sit down with all these. So yeah, our current policy is option 2, and one of the rationales for choosing option 2 in part is that option 1 requires you to pay the employee their full rate of pay for all 100 days or for all 5 months, unless you actually hire a sub for them. And then if you hire a sub, they get almost nothing. So what we did was adopt the policy, many years past, and again collectively bargained for. It's part of the contract. That we have that option 2, which states that they get their 50%, which ends up working out very roughly, or very closely, I should say, to basic short-term disability that you get from the state. And it doesn't require that we actually go in and backfill that position. If it's one that we wouldn't normally fill as a vacancy during a month absence, then we still have certainty as to what their compensation will be and what our cost will be.
Page 103. I'm concerned about this collection of student personal information for school-related, number 5, the sale by students of products or services to raise funds for school-related activities. we may collect. We may, I guess may is the operative word, right, Ben?
Right, and then it moves quickly on to this 1 and 2 about
Yeah, I wish
selling stuff to kids.
Which I have question marks on.
Yeah,
Right.
me too.
And that's where, yeah, that's the only real question I have, but, yeah.
Well, then, go right ahead to the next page.
Oh, no, that's fine.
104.
Do we sell data to anybody?
Yeah, do it.
No, we don't.
Then, yeah, then option 1.
I'm surprised that you can.
I was surprised too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I read this, I was like, really?
Yeah.
I would have
It
had
seems
more
highly
questions if the
unethical.
answer was different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so option 1. is-
sounds good. That's
Yeah.
what we will formally accept.
That's it.
That was my only thing. was that one.
Superintendent's report.
Well, I was telling Kevin earlier, anyone else watch Jimmy Kimmel? Jimmy Kimmel fans out there? Do you guys remember he has a little running sketch, or at least he did for the first few years of his show, that he always claimed that he was going to have Matt Damon on, and then as the show was wrapping up, he'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we're out of time. Matt Damon, you have to wait till next time." And so I feel like my superintendent's report has become a little bit like that. But I do have a few comments I do want to say as we start the year and as I look back on my 12 months in the role, and even actually going back a little further to the past 25 months since the board in August of 2016 appointed me to this role. I wanted to just, I know that we've said around this table a few times, or that you have said as a board, that you feel at times that, perhaps the change or the impact is not exactly what you desire for it to be. But I think there's a few things I want to highlight as to just how many things we really have been able to accomplish in these past 12 to 25 months. Broken it into a few sections. Our people, it's so hard for me to think about, we have 16 of our 18 leaders in this district, leaders defined as either as principal, assistant principal, or director, or Cheryl and myself. 16 of our 18 leaders are new to their role or new to their site in the past 2 school years. Really all of these changes began when that appointment was made back in August, and then there were some domino effects, and then obviously we know that we had Greg Bayless and a few others who left the district for great opportunities in other places. But 16 of 18 leaders new, and I still believe that the successes that we have accomplished this past 12 to 25 months have been truly special and unique for this district's recent history. On the subject of our people, I also was reflecting on the OFT negotiations we had this past year. Very successful. I believe that our relationship is strong. We entered into another 3-year settlement. Not only that, but we actually, for the first time, to my knowledge, ever as a district, said, again, that when we say that we prioritize people, that we really are putting into our budget, and we're making that ongoing commitment to prioritize our staff. And so having a multi-year guaranteed salary increase for our faculty is something that I'm very excited about. I think that, I've joked about with some that, the sacred cow, I was told when I came to the district, was benefits, and that we will never have employees make a contribution to benefits. And not only have we now have employees making a contribution, but it was actually because the employees realized it was good for them. It was a great opportunity for them to increase the salary schedule and increase their pension compensation. So we accomplished something that we knew was going to be a process of education, but really it was Angie and her team that was the ones going out. I had my one presentation. Other than that, it was you and your team that were able to help people realize that this was actually good for them and not just a underhanded play by the district to try to accomplish something. So I really do see that as such a success. And in CSEA, we have our negotiations underway. We began back in the spring and have them continue ongoing into this month and a couple weeks. I'm very confident the positive relationship that Chuck and I have and that exists between our classified staff and administration will be evident through us also successfully reaching another 3-year settlement, as we too are at the end of our contract. So a lot to celebrate as far as our people, and a lot to remember as far as just how much we've had change in the past year. Classroom experience, obviously the biggest one, or one of the biggest at least, is our your decision to move 6th grade to Matilaha. Again, I know that we don't understate it here, but this is a discussion that was taking place for multiple decades, and this board was the one that was able to have the opportunity aligned with district capability and capacity, and are really doing something that I think is exciting for this district when we talk about, really leading us into another generation. Class sizes we already talked about, all the positive there, and again, especially that focus at K3 being at nearly 24-1. Haven't seen those numbers since class size reduction more than a decade ago. CTE, we have 10 pathways. We have the most pathways on a per student basis at our secondary level than any district in the county. We have a couple here at Chaparral and the rest at Nordhoff, but again, I think some really exciting things taking place there. And then let's just talk about curriculum. I mean, we know that Common Core obviously has been something that's been discussed over the past few years and its impact on new curriculum. Last year we had the full rollout of a new elementary English language arts program. Last year we also had for the first time in a number of years a TOSA type assignment, a teacher on special assignment. That was Natalie A. Incredible science teacher we have at the high school who came into the elementaries and worked with them on science education, especially with the new NGSS, the new science standards. We right now, as you guys recall from our last meeting, we're in the process of piloting another number of social studies curriculum across the district, elementary and secondary. So again, doing things right now that really are, once in a decade or more opportunities for this district. Investments, $9 million in Measure J investments through the end of the summer. Roof replacements, HVACs, lighting upgrades, the Topa kitchen, Nordhoff cafeteria stage project, remember that one? Energy efficiencies also are going to be saving us approximately $100,000 a year. So again, some of these investments that we've made are also going to be helping us with our budget. Likewise, of course, our $500,000 investment in our transportation fleet. Looking at the 3 new buses, which are going to be completely a financially neutral event within 6 years, and will then actually become a revenue generator in that year 6, year 7 through the camper mile relationship. As well as, even actually today I was spending time trying to coordinate. We are using our bus to drive our football team this weekend or this Friday to their game up in San Marcos. So, we are actually doing what we said we were going to be doing, which is using them to save money. It wasn't going to be over $1,000 to use a charter, and we're doing it for, a quarter of that cost. Few challenges. I didn't want to highlight these too much because this is really about things I want to, just to remind ourselves of what we've done over the past 12 months together. But of course, last year we did have the tree incident at Topa. We had Thomas Fire. We had the Monteo mudslides and our own concerns. And then ultimately at the end of the school year, the very challenging decision for Summit's closure for the school year. This year, I think we have a number of exciting transitions. Obviously, again, Matilahaw is one of our, is one of the biggest things that we're focusing on this year as far as transitioning it to a middle school and having that be, as you guys have eloquently stated, that it's not simply housing 6th grade at a school site. It is much more when we talk about that middle school concept. So working on that. Cheryl has been actively engaged in the PLCs, building out those professional learning communities, and this is going to be a year that really also takes even greater depth into our professional learning community. Obviously, we have more construction projects. We know the library is going to be done or being worked on during the school year. The exciting conversation we had earlier today for Matilahaw's cafeteria and dining hall options. We have some big construction projects that are taking place this year. So, number of things I'm excited about. The last thing I'll just say is we started a few weeks ago with our leadership team, and it's rolled out to others as well, that Cheryl and I both really are wanting to prioritize this year the idea of starting with why. Last year, our leadership team was tasked with reading the book Leaders Eat Last. Simon Sinek is the author. And we talked about at our leadership team about what does that mean and some of those concepts. And this year, another one of his books is starting with why. The idea is, talking about why you do what you do as opposed to what you actually do. And so we had that conversation with leadership. I went to the classified employee training. We had 150 classified employees the day before school, and then gave a 15-minute presentation on again, why I personally am in education. I can give you guys that someday as well. But reminding them of the importance of what each one of them does as part of the overall mission. And I likened it, and I've shared this story now a number of times. One of my favorite stories is the story of when Lyndon Johnson became president, LBJ. Remember back in the 60s, JFK promised that we're going to have a man on the moon before the end of the decade, which was a task that no one knew if it could actually be done. I mean, he set a very ambitious goal. Of course, with his assassination, he wasn't able to realize that dream, but LBJ steps in, and as the story goes, in his first few months in the presidency, he was, of course, very interested in NASA and about how progress was going on reaching this just audacious goal. And so he decided to become the first president to actually go down and visit in Florida, I guess it's Cape Canaveral, perhaps, the NASA station down there. And so, of course, everyone was frantically getting ready for his arrival, and he was down there, and I'm sure you guys know some about LBJ, but he was a pretty interesting character and loved to just be intimidating and rough guy. So he's, pointing, he'd walk in the room, kind of like Mike Pence, touching things that he wasn't supposed to touch and pointing to things he wasn't supposed to really go into. But he eventually sees this man walking down the hall and just gets right into his face, and it was a custodian. And he says, what do you do around here? And the custodian responds, he says, Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon. And I just love that story of, again, every single person within NASA at that time had bought into this vision that, again, no one even knew if it could be done. Fortunately, 5 years later, we did do it. But that's what we're trying to really emphasize to all of our staff. Whether it's a second grade teacher that might be focused on certain literacy skills and not realizing how all of it fits into the bigger picture of that 18-year-old who's graduating, the way that we're able to change family trees, that we're able to truly impact generations into the future, or the custodian, or our other employees. So something we're really focused on this year, and one of the things that we're also going to be doing is maybe bringing kids to a few more things. Like I would love to be able to have student presentations a little more often here, because I think even for us that we can so often be looking at 110 pages of board policies and forget the why a little bit as well. And so that's something that you'll be hearing from me and hearing from our leadership team when you go out to school sites, I hope, and certainly here as well. And then we're also just going to do a few fun things this year. We did Forest Home to start the school year. We are bringing back the sheet cakes for our classified and certificate appreciation week. That was something that we had 10 years ago that apparently went away, but we know that we have budgetary limitations, but we really do want to make sure that our staff feel valued, and so that's going to be another priority this year, is just bringing some fun, lighthearted things in there. So those are my comments. I'm not sure it was as exciting as if Matt Damon had been on the set, but I really do think that we have done a lot in the past 12 months, in the past 24 months. We have a really exciting year ahead of us, and so I just am I'm excited to be a part of this team.
I just have a very brief board member report. I am pleased to report to each of you that you are now officially welcome on the sidelines of Nordoff football games. I made that official through negotiating with Dave Munson, and then I reported it to Andy, who apparently thought I was a little over the top. And so when I arrived, I found that in the ticket booth was a beautiful sideline pass that had been drafted by Christian.
That's right.
And I walked out onto the field with my pass, and Christian's like, so psyched. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, thank you, Christian. The police stopped me, but then I told him, I showed him my pass. He's like to Andy, I told you.
He really was so excited. So, if anyone else would like a field pass, there are plenty more where that came from. My son will be happy to make you one.
It's awesome.
Awesome, sounds good.
I just wanted to mention, I was at San Antonio for the open house, and, they're being so welcoming to the Summit families, and to the teachers, the Summit teachers, and the families, and they're really, really making an effort to know that, they're at a different spot, but they're still home. So that was really nice.
What's your sense of the response from the Summit families? Are they feeling?
I didn't get a chance to see
Yeah.
any of them. I just heard Robin's presentation, and then I talked to Sherry and Kim, and so.
Has there been any feedback on that time change at San Antonio?
Is it
For
starting at
families?
8?
Oh, yeah, it's starting at 8.
now.
No
No.
feedback?
I heard one little thing, I just wondered if.
There's a lot on Facebook.
Oh, is there?
And is it positive or negative?
Positive.
Oh, really?
Oh, interesting.
Congratulations to you, because we could never get it moved.
Whoa, why isn't that on your list?
That's okay. All state will be at 8:30.
Well, but not for the elementary. That bill was only for junior high.
That's
and high
right,
school.
junior high and high school.
Right.
And it exempts middle schools.
Oh, I do have one other thing. I forgot to let you guys know that the Student Advisory Council at Nordoff is moving forward. We have our freshman and sophomore reps, and then the junior and senior reps will be voted on Friday.
And we've got some great candidates, I know, certainly from the junior and senior groups.
Yeah. I'd have to send it to you. Sophie, Marina, so, I don't know, and Ray Davison, I think. They will be here, all of them will be here at the next meeting,
That's great.
so that you can meet them.
Thanks for doing all that.
Abby
work.
Runyon is running, and Stella Moore
Abilene,
for the
Stella,
seniors.
yeah.
Anyone else? And we move to the consent calendar? I think that's the last thing. Oh, I think we kind of talked that through, future agenda. And moving to the consent calendar.
Do we
Anyone?
have to do the last one
She
first, or
wasn't
can
until I
we?
would just read it. What's that?
Do we have to do the last one separately, or we can just?
Nope, they can all be done together.
I'll move to approve.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry, second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Man, I'm so bad at this, and then I'm gonna be termed out before I ever got any good at it.
Your gavel.
I'm like,
There we go.